from O'Brien, and 9 are not.
Right.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Can I start?
We have left. Alex is here.
Can I start?
No, you only have 4 people.
We can't.
Okay, we're shutting off.
Once he sits, you can start.
Okay.
Or you can start now. You don't need-
Eve-
Is Kim ready?
Yep,
Sorry.
yep. Good evening, everyone. It is 7:33 on Tuesday, March 21st, 2023, and we will begin our town council meeting. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. May we please have a moment of silence for all those who serve in our military at home and abroad, and for their families. Thank you. Clerk Casey, could we have a roll call, please, to begin the meeting?
Roll call will be Councilor Barecki.
Here.
Baraka. Councilor Hume.
Here.
Councilor Rengus.
Here.
Councilor Flaherty.
Here.
Councilor Ryan will be absent. Councilor Reynolds.
Here.
Councilor Maglio.
Here.
Councilor O'Brien. Present. And Councilor Mackin will be absent this evening.
Thank you very much, Clerk Casey. All right, we're going to begin our council meeting this evening with announcements. And first, I would turn to Councilor Hume for our update on the charter review.
Charter Review Committee meeting. We had a meeting scheduled this week, but it is being canceled. A new date has not yet been set. Once that is set, it will go out as a public meeting notice. So that is the only update for this evening.
Thank you very much. Are there any updates from any other councilors this evening? No? All right. So tonight, again, thank you all for being with us and welcome. It is our second public hearing conducted by the council regarding the hazardous material fire that occurred at Clean Harbors on Hill Avenue the evening of February 16th, 2023. At our February 28th council meeting, we gathered more than 100 resident questions and concerns. A preliminary public inquiry report has been published and is available to residents on the Town Council webpage, so I encourage you to take a look at that. That report provides a list of questions and the documents received related to the Clean Harbors fire, and those documents go up through March 3rd. These include the trailer manifests and the fire report, among others. And since it was published, more information has come into the council, and that report will be revised over the coming weeks. And again, I encourage residents to access all the information on the Town Council webpage, and it's on the town's website, which is braintreema.gov. Tonight, we hope to begin to answer some of those questions and others that may arise. I've asked the mayor, the fire chief, the water superintendent, members of Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection, and executives of Clean Harbors to appear before us tonight. And I thank them all for responding to my request to appear with us. For residents, if you would like to speak tonight regarding Clean Harbors, please sign in at the table at the door. We will take public comment, and you will be allowed to speak for 3 minutes. So let me lay out the ground rules for tonight so everyone knows what to expect. First, we'll hear from the mayor, then the fire chief, and the water superintendent. Next, we'll have Mass DEP come and present. We have with us tonight Mr. Greg Cooper. He's the director of the Mass DEP Boston office, the Bureau of Air and Waste and Hazardous and Solid Waste Division. And Millie Garcia Serrano is our Regional Director for the Mass TEP Southeast Regional Office. Finally, we'll hear from representatives of Clean Harbors. I'll ask the counselors, please hold your questions until after each presenter has finished speaking, and then counselors will have an opportunity to ask each speaker questions. After all that, residents who wish to speak again, please sign in, and we want to hear from as many people as possible. So residents may speak up to 3 minutes, just like we did if you were here on February 28th. When you hear me tap the gavel once, that's 30 seconds remaining, and I will tap the gavel twice or otherwise let you know when your time is up. Residents should address the council, and after all residents have spoken, again, our presenters will have an opportunity to respond if they wish. And as we said at our February 28th hearing, we will continue to keep this on the council agenda for as long as is necessary. So with that, I'd like to introduce Mayor Kokoros, and thank you for joining us, Mr. Mayor, this evening.
Thank you, Council President and members. I just wanted to read into the record a letter that I had drafted and sent in regards to Clean Harbors and reopening. And this was directly sent to Clean Harbors to Rebecca Underwood. And the letter reads as follows. Dear Ms. Underwood, I'm opposing Clean Harbors' March 2nd, 2023 request for resumption of regular operations to the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection. As you know, on February 16th, 2023, a significant fire occurred at Clean Harbors' Braintree site at a trailer storage area at approximately 10 p.m. As a result of that fire, operations ceased on site until the resumption of temporary limited operations, which were allowed by Mass DEP on February 27th. The town of Braintree strongly believes that Clean Harbors should not be allowed to resume regular operations until multiple critical outstanding issues are addressed. The health and safety of our residents of Braintree are of the utmost importance to me. To that end, at minimum, Clean Harbors must eliminate the storage of hazardous materials in tractor trailers on site, as well as material and debris from the February 16th fire. The practice of storing flammable materials stacked within warehouse, the warehouse must be reassessed to facilitate improved fire suppression. And on-site fire suppression capabilities must be upgraded. Permanent air quality monitors must be installed on-site and within the surrounding neighborhood to provide real-time information to the residents. And an air quality analysis must be provided to the town delineating the impacts of the February 16th fire. In addition, there are still many outstanding issues raised by our residents at the February 28th Town Council meeting that must be addressed. Clean Harbors must commit to working with the town and surrounding industries in East Braintree to develop an evacuation plan. Until the foregoing items are addressed by Clean Harbors, the town cannot support a return to regular operations, and that is signed by me, Mayor Charles C. Kokoros. I just wanted to read that into the record and say that, understanding that the DP and has its jurisdiction, there are many concerns that we have in regards to Clean Harbors based on what I witnessed that night, and I think it's important not only for these things to be addressed, but also to look at, as many people have talked about, a regional evacuation plan to cover the whole basin. And that is something that we're going to reach out to MEMA to see what resources they have, as well as we're going to have a meeting with CITGO. We'd like these industries that create these hazards to be able to pay for the monitoring of the air quality, as well as having a real professional consultant do the analysis of an evacuation plan, because it's imperative that that's where we move forward from here. I know that there's been correspondence since this letter that's gone back and forth, and I know that you as councilors have received it. And I will just say that, we stand firm in our belief that, these things should be addressed prior to their operation resuming. And we will continue to work with MEMA as well as any other of these groups that bring hazard to the area. So it's my belief that Citgo, Clean Harbors, and any other businesses within that area should have air quality monitoring devices. And we'd also like to see those in the neighborhood. I'd love to hear Clean Harbors talk about a commitment and see if they would make that commitment to pay for these at minimal around their site and in the neighborhood. So those are some of the things that we're looking for. But quite frankly, we as a town at this point, in talking with my fire chief, feel strongly about this. And I'm sure you'll hear about what's happened since then. But thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mayor Kokoros. This time, Chief O'Brien, would you like to address the council? Thank you for joining us tonight, Chief.
Thank you, Madam President. As Mayor Kokoros stated, there's been numerous meetings and emails, telephone calls back and forth since the last council meeting. To echo his concerns, the two most important things I believe we would all agree on is an evacuation plan and the air quality monitoring. What I need to do is schedule, and I've spoken with Chief Jackson from Quincy Fire. I have not spoken to Chief Stark from Weymouth, but I'd like to sit down with them and get their input. As far as an evacuation plan goes, we're not the only town that's involved in this, and their input is just as important as mine and everybody else's here. So until I can sit down with them and come up with something on our end of it, I'm really not comfortable myself. But again, there's been multiple correspondence between the DEP, Clean Harbors, the town, council, everybody. So if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you, Chief. With that, and I appreciate that, I will open it up to the councilors for questions. And we do start with the fire chief, and then I know we also have our water superintendent here, but if we can start with fire, that would be great. Councilor Flaherty.
I'm not 100% sure whether this is a question for the chief or for the mayor, but because I understand that not all air quality monitors are the same, and some of them produce data that is more sophisticated than others, do we have a clear understanding of what kind of air quality monitors we're looking to advocate for, or a strategy for how many we might need, or where they should go in various parts of the abutting neighborhoods, aside from the sites of the industrial sites themselves? Do we know where they would go?
Well, again, that's something that needs to be discussed as far as how many and strategically where they would be placed. If you look at the existing evacuation plan that we have, it doesn't just go to Quincy Ave. It goes all the way back to Howard Street. So we're talking monitors in that area as well as up and down the neighborhoods of Quincy Ave, both sides.
Okay, and is there a accompanying line of reasoning for the kinds of air quality that we would look for to trigger a need for an evacuation or a resident alert of some kind? I am all for the idea of adding air quality monitoring to our community, but then it would produce data, and there should be a plan for what to do with the data and what kind of data would produce what kind of action on behalf of our local government. So I know that you would be in the very beginning of that kind of conversation, but where is that conversation leading you now?
It's actually leading me towards the DEP probably answering that question. Maybe putting their 2 cents in and seeing what they think, what their opinion is on where these monitors, how many should be and where they should be. I wish I had the expertise to give you a better answer. I just don't.
Okay.
So, Counselor Maglio?
I just have a quick question / comment right now, but I have a lot more, so fear not. I just want to clarify. We're talking about them, Clean Harbors, being able to start operating again and meeting these conditions that were in the letter that the mayor just read to us into the record. But Clean Harbors has already started operations. They have started up their regular operations because of getting that approval from DEP. So what are we waiting for? Where are the air quality monitors? What is the story here?
It's a great question. I don't know.
Counselor Magley, we can table that too until DP joins.
Thank you.
Oh,
Okay. I'm going to just switch chairs, sorry.
Oh, okay.
Excuse me, sorry. My chair was going down.
Broken piece of furniture. Did you have a question, Counselor Reynolds?
Good evening, Chief.
Good evening.
Just a quick question on the suggestions that were made from the mayor's office and the evacuation plan, I think was referenced, and an air quality monitoring, which was just further questioned. The evacuation, the air quality monitoring, would there be a requirement, let me put it this way, would there be a requirement, and would it make sense for a requirement for air monitoring stations to have the ability to alert local police, fire, if something was detected above a certain level immediately, once the occurrence, once that level of dangerous particles or gases or whatever the case may be, hopefully never happens, but if it were to happen, is there technology, are you aware of? I'm certain that there may be, and would that be something that the town would push for?
I would say so. I mean, you know, if you think about it, and this is something that I want to talk to the other two chiefs about, if the parts per million of any of these chemicals get to a certain point, and it triggered an automatic alert, somewhat like we would call it a box alarm, that would certainly help us in our response.
Absolutely. I would agree with you on that. So I would definitely support that approach. Just to follow that up, so let's just say we have that type of technology in place. It's used, but it would be one scenario where we would then have to take additional steps to protect the public, particularly in the neighborhoods, residents in the Braintree, Quincy, Weymouth areas who are in that impact zone of whichever way the winds are blowing, et cetera. That zone can vary, okay? A verbal communication, emergency communication to residents. I would think that would also be a part of something that we want to, as we're planning an evacuation plan, we're working with those other two communities, we're working with our own BEMA organization, our own public safety organization. I would like to see and ensure that we have some type of an alert system, a public notification alert system similar to the reverse 911, that would become effective and be utilized during an event and obviously those who are monitoring the event, those who are on standby, those who have become aware, those who are engaging, who are leading the response. I'm sure that there would probably be some protocol to follow, but I would assume that there would be, within minutes, a decision made that we need to notify folks.
Absolutely. And are you referring to like an internal?
Similar to what we have as a 911. We have that
Oh, okay.
capability here in Braintree to do that.
All right. I mean, there's an audible alarm as well that could ring through a neighborhood.
Like an air raid siren.
Or something like that.
Yeah.
But I think
I'm talking more of like that reverse
right.
911
Obviously,
system.
we're in the 21st century here, so
Yeah.
it's we're probably a little bit more feasible, I think.
Right. And we
to,
have that capability present.
Oh, definitely. I think
Right.
so. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you,
And
Chief.
what we would do, to your point, if there was an automatic alerting system, and we have a response, we go there, we come across something that we need to make a decision right away to evacuate. Now we go to a next step, and we have another alert.
Yes.
Okay, so that we're all on the same page here, and again, not to be redundant, but I want to get in touch with, have a sit-down with the Quincy Fire Chief as well as the Weymouth Fire Chief.
Great. Thank you, Chief.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Chief. Any other questions for the fire chief? Counselor Maglio, go ahead for the second time.
Sorry. I just want to reiterate, and I want to make sure to underscore this, and I may say it again, too. They're already operating again. They are running. They have resumed regular business, regular operations. This has already happened. And now they're running again. Regular operations. I was there and saw it for myself. So, you know, for the chief to have to take on what is essentially a second job in reaching out to other fire departments to try and get them to be available in order to come up with a plan seems like a heavy lift for someone who's already probably pretty busy. So I really want to hear from Clean Harbors and what you're going to do to keep us safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Maglio.
I think, can I add something? I think,
Go right ahead, Chief.
in all
Go ahead.
fairness,
Please hold your applause, folks. Let the chief speak.
in all fairness, we have a two-man detail with an engine during operating hours. So we're right there. There's no delay in response. I know that's not the answer everyone's looking for, but we are there. We are a presence there.
Thank you, Chief. Go ahead, Counselor Hume.
So you have people on site, your men, women on site since the fire?
Yes,
Who's paying for this detail?
Clean Harbors.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Chief, I have a question just before you go. Switching gears a little bit, I do want to touch on the safety of our firefighters, and hoping we can get an update on the condition of the fire station. I understand I know because I saw it, 2 showers, 1 for the men, 1 for the women, inadequate amount for decontamination quickly and safely for our first responders who were exposed on site at the fire. Can you provide us with an update as to the refurbishment of the fire station headquarters?
Right now, we're just about done with the design phase. The architect was actually out there today for another walkthrough. They have another architect that just came on the job, and she wanted to show him what was going on. From there, we'll go to the permitting phase. And as the mayor mentioned in his State of the Town address, we're hoping for maybe November, start of construction.
Okay.
And at headquarters, we do not have any decontamination showers. We do at East Braintree, and we do at the Highland Station, but not at headquarters.
Noted, thank you. Anyone else? Okay. For the chief?
What are their duties on site?
Excuse me?
What are the firefighters' duties on site for the detail that is at Clean Harbors now?
It's basically monitoring, you know, making sure that all the contaminated trailers, the contents of those have been disposed of. They're taking down a building, doing a little demolition there, so that would require a detail in and of itself. So while they're doing that, there's a single detail and then a 2-man detail with an engine. So if something were to spark up by any chance, which I don't think it would because they're not doing that part of the operation, we're there.
So they're there for fire response?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you. Everybody good? Thank you, Chief.
You're welcome.
At this time, I'd invite Mr. Dutton, our water superintendent, to come before the council. Thank you so much for being here tonight, Mr. Dutton.
Madam Chair. So a little bit about our flushing program and how we maintain our hydrants in the town. Every April, we're going to actually be advertising next week. We're going to start the second week of April. That starts our flushing program, where we actually flush the hydrants, check the water mains, and at the same time, make sure that all the hydrants are in working order. The program goes until the very last hydrant is done, or if we're in water restrictions, then we have to halt. And then we resume in the fall if we can. If we can't, then we take care of it in the spring, the following spring. Any hydrants that we find that are out of service, cannot operate, we try our best to expedite the repair or replacement of the hydrants. We have 1,455 hydrants in the town right now. Inoperable hydrants, we have 5. Monatic Avenue, Granite Street, Sheridan, Milton Road, Washington. The reason why they haven't been repaired is because we're waiting for the springtime, because we have to open up the road, because we have to do a physical shutdown of the water main to replace these hydrants. So they'll be replaced in the spring. And then we should be starting with a clean slate, and then if we find anything, you know, when we do the next program, then we'll get those on the list and get those fixed. Any hydrant that's out of service is reported to the fire station so that they know. Hill Ave, we have one hydrant that's on the base of Hill Ave. We were in the process of replacing the water main on Quincy Avenue, and there was a supply chain issue, so we had to shut down that project in the fall, and we ended at Audubon. So in the springtime, they're starting next week, they're going to start running bypass. So they'll be running from Audubon all the way down up Hill Ave to that hydrant. That'll all be brand new. And that was the original plan, but we were not able to finish it because of supply chain. We couldn't get the pipe. So Clean Harbors did reach out to me, a representative from Clean Harbors, and they're thinking of extending the water main from the bottom of Hill Ave all the way to their facility and tying into their facility. So that'll create a loop, and it'll also create 2 to 3 more hydrants going up Hill Ave. Also this year, we will be performing another master plan. We did our first master plan in 2002. It took 20 years to complete, with the last water main being replaced was Kane Ave. So we're going to do another master plan, see if there's any more deficiencies in the system, and then start correcting those as well.
Thank you, Mr. Dutton. Councilor Hume?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Dutton. So Hill Ave, only one fire hydrant that the town has, and only one in that area, correct?
There's one on the Quirk property, or the Jeep Chrysler property. And there's also one by the old, I know by Digitanos. There's one there also.
Okay. And that hydrant on Hill Ave was not working on February 16th because of the fall project and supply chain issues?
It was working, and that's the whole thing, the confusion. The hydrant was operable, but because of the condition of the water main, it wasn't allowing water to flow through it. It's like in your kitchen, if you open up your tap and you have low pressure, you're not going to get as much water out of it. It's the same principle. The hydrant was operable, it just wasn't getting the water.
So the actual hydrant itself was fine, did not need to be replaced. The water was an issue. So you said that if a hydrant's not operational, the fire department will be notified.
They will be notified.
The hydrant itself was working, but water wasn't flowing, so to me, it's not operational. Was the fire department notified of that?
No,
And why not?
because it was flowing at a rate where there is or could be sufficient water coming out of it to be able to hook to a pumper truck and possibly increase the pressure.
Was that, so when it was known that the water wasn't flowing, was there any communication, collaboration with the fire department to test that, especially when we're dealing with the Clean Harbor site?
No.
Why not?
It's just standard practice.
So the fire did not know they were going to a faulty hydrant when they went to this fire, correct?
Don't know.
Can we?
I'd have to check the log.
The chief, yeah.
Yeah. Chief O'Brien, do you mind coming back? Thank you.
Was fire aware of any of this? Your groups went to hook up to this hydrant, correct? The day
Correct.
of this fire, and no flow? Is that correct?
No, but I do know what Lou's talking about. Technically, it's not out of service, so they wouldn't have notified us because it was operable. But, as he said, there wasn't enough pressure, the pressure that we needed. Usually, we could take that pressure, and with our pumps, we increased the pressure. Unfortunately, we couldn't do that, and we didn't find that out until that moment. We did meet down there a day, 2 days later?
I think it was 2 days.
2 days later, at the site of the hydrant. Myself, Captain Pistorino, Lou, and
John Thompson.
John Thompson.
So the 5 hydrants that are not working, are there any other hydrants in the town with these flow issues? And
So a couple of members from the water department went to, and Lou and I discussed this, when they call the fire department, they're actually calling Brewster Ambulance. So it's up to the dispatchers at Brewster Ambulance to notify us that a hydrant's out of service. So it's not a fault of the water department, more so a miscommunication.
I'm not faulting anybody.
No, no,
It just
it's-
was not working.
I'm just trying to
That's
explain,
not
you know,
okay.
how things roll out here. We would rely on the dispatchers from Brewster to let us know, probably en route, hey, grab the second hydrant, grab the third hydrant, this one's out of service, so on and so forth.
So there wouldn't have been any communication on this hydrant with any flow issues, anything like that?
No.
It's just you show up and figure it out? Is that what happened?
Right, yeah, and historically, we've had a lot of issues on Quincy Ave with, you know, water pressure and so on and so forth. So, again, standard protocol is to grab the first hydrant that we see. That was the first hydrant.
Okay. Thank you, Chief.
You're welcome.
Back to Mr. Dutton. So is there any reason why we wouldn't include these low flow issues in conjunction with these hydrants that aren't working?
Right now, we have 39 in the town that are low flow.
Okay.
So
It's
we
it's
can
important,
make a,
though.
yeah, we can make a list and we
Yeah.
can either, but Quincy Ave and Hill Ave is a different circumstance where it's the end of the line. So there's nothing further after that. A lot of the other hydrants that are in the town where the 39 are, there are working hydrants within 100 to 100 feet of them. So it's not as, I don't want to say big of a deal, but you still have the firefighting capability with those 39 hydrants because there's so many others around them. But this, like I said, Hill Avenue was a different situation where it's the end of the line.
Yeah, okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dutton. If I may, I think, you know, one of the things that I want to make sure is relayed is it's not just an evacuation plan that we need. We need to understand the safety and security for the entire town. It's definitely disconcerting to hear that there's many, many, many steps before we can even know whether or not a hydrant is working or there's a low flow pressure. So I would request that we get some kind of an audit on fire hydrants and or low flow pipes, because especially to hear that Quincy Ave has been a continual problem in the most industrial part of town with multiple high hazard industries, and it was a known problem, certainly is cause for concern to me. And so I'm hoping whether it goes to the DPW committee, public safety, or comes back to the full council, as a resident, a parent, a counselor, I certainly want to know that the hydrants and the water are working at all times, and we need to understand how the communication is working between the water department and the fire department, and that it's consistent, it's clear, and there's a plan of action. So, thank you. Councilor Maglio?
Yes, I'd also like to add, I'm curious, so this happened on February 16th. There's been some deconstruction of, you know, what happened. Has there been any are there any drafts in terms of a new policy to make sure that a low operating or low flow or inoperable of the 39 plus then the 5 that are out of service, is there some sort of new communication policy that's been tested, bandied about?
What I can do is, instead of calling Brewster Ambulance, I mean, I can just send a quick text to the chief, the deputies, and do it that way. That way there, we're talking directly to Braintree.
And then, does the chief have a formal way so that whoever's driving would get the information that was on the text?
I can discuss that with the chief
That would be great.
and work something out.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Counselor O'Brien?
Dutton, thank you very much for coming, I should say, Director Dutton. So tell me if I'm correctly hearing this. If the chief had a pumper truck, this wouldn't be a problem. But apparently the pumper, if I'm saying the terminology correctly, was not available, wasn't there, et cetera, so therefore it became an issue.
It depends on how low the flow was.
Okay. Is there a protocol, or what is the protocol for notifying, in this case here, you said the chief or the fire department about the non-functional hydrants? And how would they know, or how would Brewster know, is that a documented policy?
Anything that we find that is inoperable, as far as does not operate at all, Brewster's notified. Once we make the repair, then we call Brewster, say it's back in service.
Okay, so it sounds fairly easy to just modify the policy
Yeah.
to say less than functional. I mean, they're functioning, we get that right now.
Right.
Thank you very much for that update, but just modify it so both less than functional and non-functional. And I think that, nobody wants their house to burn down.
Yeah.
Thank God there was nobody injured, except for maybe people that showed up, but it stands to reason that people, time is everything with a fire. So I think lesson learned, unfortunately, but thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Counselor O'Brien. Any other questions from the counselors for the water superintendent? Counselor Flaherty?
There are 39 low-flow hydrants. Are you always aware of like how many hydrants are connected to these low-flow areas, or did they just get counted up as a consequence of this event?
No, we have a program called Setaru. So each hydrant that we check, it's actually on a GIS map. So the guys go out, and when they get to the hydrant, they press on the hydrant that they're at, comes up, they enter all the information, the flow data, everything, and it goes into a database. So we know exactly where they are and what mains that they're on, and that compiled with the new master plan that we're going to do will show the deficiencies that are in the town, and then we can focus our efforts on water main replacements at that point and get those replaced so that those hydrants will be normal flow.
Okay, so the master plan is what will be used to
Yes.
determine addressing the function of the pipes.
Yes.
All right, that's all.
Counselor Ringus?
I don't want to keep beating a dead horse, but so we have 39 low flow,
Yep,
5 inoperable.
correct.
What would inoperable, so to me, I think like Councilor Hume said, if we can't use it, if it's not working, then to me, whether it's low flow or it's inoperable, in the semantics of it, to me, it's inoperable. What would you define as inoperable? It's like a defect in the hydrant itself or something
Yeah,
to that
so
effect?
if we start to open it up and all of a sudden you hear a snap and the stem breaks, it just keeps spinning, you're never going to open that hydrant, so it's inoperable. You cannot use it at all.
And we have 5 of those in town.
Correct.
Total.
Yep.
And then we have the low flow, we have 39.
39, correct.
Now, you said, I know you said the current practice, or the practice at the time of this event, was that Brewster would be informed of this, and it was
Correct.
Brewster became this middleman to inform the fire department. And I think a couple moments ago, you said you could perhaps text the chief to sort of give him, but just kind of piggybacking on something you just said even less moments ago, you said that there's sort of, when they go out, they create sort of a GIS map of where all the low flow ones are, and that's a database that you have
It's a
access to?
yeah, it's a database that we have so that we can see physically where the hydrants are. Once we finish with that particular hydrant, what it does is it goes from green to red, so we know we've done it, move on to the next one.
Is
So-
there a way that, and I don't mean to interrupt you, but is there a way that data, instead of a text, is there a way that database itself could be shared with the fire department?
It's a very large database. You're talking 1,400 hydrants.
Is there a
1,455.
way that you could, and again, I'm just kind of thinking out loud because this is the first I'm hearing of it. Is there a way we could cull out the ones that are inoperable so
Oh,
that
yeah.
the chief would have, instead of a text, if the chief would have an actual database in his office, or that, a lieutenant could access, so that the fire department have sort of, again, Brewster does a great job, but I think I'd just rather two town departments communicating directly than having that middleman.
Yeah, so just as an example, this would be hydrants between 500 and 1,000.
Okay.
So I can create anything like this and send it right off to the chief.
If you could create something like that and get it to the chief, I would be a huge advocate for that. And if you could provide that to the council as well through Clerk Semino, so we could see where the inoperable and the low flow ones are, that'd be phenomenal. Thank you.
Could do that.
Thank you. Thank you for your work.
Counselor Maglio?
One more question, I think, around the hydrants. I recall hearing that there are some hydrants on Clean Harbors property and on Quirk property. How many are there, and are those working, and what's the status
Oh, yeah.
on those?
The hydrants that are on Clean Harbors, they're fine. They're privately owned. That's what a majority of the fire, from what I understand, was fought with. They had perfect pressure. There was nothing wrong with those hydrants. The Quirk property, they were all dead. They're not Braintree hydrants. Those are fed from Quincy.
Okay, so the Clean Harbors hydrants were, where do they get that water from?
That comes off a 10-inch line that goes through the Citgo property and then into Clean Harbors,
Where does that line originate from?
Quincy Ave.
So is it Braintree water, or is it a
It's
private?
Braintree water, yes.
Okay, so the public hydrants are connected through the main on Quincy Ave. The private hydrants are connected through a main that cuts over and goes under
Goes through the
Citgo.
Citgo property and into Clean Harbors.
And the Quirk hydrants are on Quincy property, or,
It's Braintree property, but it's fed through water mains from Quincy.
okay,
It's not Braintree water.
okay. So how would they, who takes care of that? Are those privately owned by Quirk?
Yep.
Do we have a role in notifying people that their privately owned hydrants don't work?
That is something that the Water and Sewer Department doesn't get involved in. Maybe that would be a question for the fire chief, because that's part of fire control.
Chief,
Okay,
I don't
would you
know.
like to answer that?
thank you, okay. So if Quirk has fire hydrants that are not working and they're being fed from Quincy, how does that information get transferred back to Quirk? That they have hydrants that are not working?
I don't think it does. Again, this is something I can address with Chief Jackson from Quincy, and hopefully, and maybe sit down with Dan Quirk. But there definitely needs to be a notification system put in place. It is private property there, but, it does affect the public, as we all saw with an incident like that. So that's communication that needs to be given to us.
Or from us?
Or from
To
us.
the people that own them?
Right? Once it's given to us, we can then, in turn, spread it.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Counselor Maglio. Oh, Chief, 1 minute, Chief, don't leave yet. Counselor Hume, second time, yep.
So, thank you. Mr. Dutton, so you have a database for all working hydrants, non-working hydrants. It's a DPW program?
What's that?
It's a DPW program,
Water and
right?
sewer.
It's not shared with the fire department?
No.
So, Chief, your job is, you rely on water for your men and women to successfully do your job. You don't have access to a program like this?
No, it's usually done through phone calls. And again, I'm trying not to be redundant, but when they notified the Braintree Fire Department, I talked to Lou today, they weren't even aware that they weren't calling the fire department. Because when Brewster Dispatch answers the phone, they answer it as Braintree Fire. So they're getting that information. They relay it to us most of the time.
So is there any system in place where your department would have access to all these hydrants? And whether they're functioning or non-functioning?
If you're talking about what we call hose evolutions, how we respond to a fire, this town is very, very well protected with the water source, the hydrants. Again, I think it was, what'd you say, 1,480?
No, 1455.
1,455 hydrants for a 14 square mile town is, I'm not going to call it excessive, but it's plentiful. And they're perfectly spaced apart. If we come across one, where usually the second engine will stop to lay the line, they'll hook up to the hydrant, then they'll hook into the lead engine, and if that doesn't work, the second engine coming behind them will grab the next hydrant. We've never come across an incident where 2 hydrants in a row haven't worked.
Okay. I'm going to agree with Councilor Ringus. I think Brewster does a great job, but I think we need to keep that communication in-house. And I don't think a text is sufficient, and I'll agree with the president that we do need more review on the hydrant. So I'm going to wait for that in the future, but thank you both.
Yeah, as Lou said, I think we can figure that out pretty quickly.
Yeah.
One follow-up question. Is there even just a tag or something that goes on the hydrants so that it's instantly recognizable to the fire department and/or residents that that hydrant is inoperable?
We used to have bags that we used.
Sorry, can you use the mic? Thank you.
We used to have bags that we would place over the hydrant, but over time, kids and everything, they pull them off. So we're going to look into possibly getting, they do make rings that you can put right on the nozzle that says out of service. We're going to try and look into those, and we're going to identify them that way.
That would be excellent, and we will add that to our list of follow-ups, so thank you very much. Any other questions for the water superintendent? Thank you both. Okay. All right, at this time, I'd like to call up our folks from the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection. I know we have with us this evening Mr. Greg Cooper and Ms. Millie Garcia Serrano, and if whoever is presenting can please state their name and affiliation and title, that would be helpful. Thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is Millie Garcia Serrano, and I serve as the Regional Director of Mass DEP in the Southeast region. We're located in Lakeville, Massachusetts. Honorable Madam Council President, Honorable Councils, Honorable Mayor Kokoros, members of the public, thank you so much for inviting Mass DEP. You invited us last month. We were here on a listening mode. We learned a lot. We were asked to come back tonight, and here we are. Basically to talk a little bit about what we know and provide a little bit more insight with regards to the fire that broke out on February 16 at approximately 10:30 p.m. That fire broke out at the Clean Harbors facility, which is geographically located in the Southeast region, which is why the Southeast Region Mass DEP team is here tonight. We have a number of programs at play, including hazardous waste, the Chapter 21E Mass Contingency Plan, program, cleanup program, also the AIR program, and potentially other programs that we are continuing to explore as to any kind of endpoints regarding compliance and any kind of enforcement, if that's where it leads us. DEP is responsible for the cleanup oversight of this facility's sudden release of oil hazardous materials, again, stemming from the fire the evening of February 16th. In addition to also, we are tasked and responsible with the licensing and compliance of the operations at that transfer, storage, and disposal facility. There's been many questions, very thoughtful commentary that Mass DEP has had time and moment and space to absorb and analyze. And in the interest of time and in the interest of also everyone who's expressed interest in this particular incident. We took a cue from the counselors, and thank you, Councilor Maglio and Council President Borica. We created a web page to better localize and collate our information, and we will continue to upload additional information. This is what it looks like. And if you were to query Mass DEP and Clean Harbors, I believe it's a second entry. You can access that information. So tonight, I'd like to introduce my colleagues, also from the Mass DEP office. I'll start with Mr. Greg Cooper, who is the Division Director for the Hazardous Waste and Solid Waste Program. Greg is responsible for the oversight of those very important state programs, some of them actually with federal a touchback with the federal programs. So we model our hazardous waste program particularly akin to the US EPA's RCRA program. He's going to provide us with a lot of information tonight. Second, Mr. Seth Pickering, who's a Deputy Regional Director in the Southeast Region Office for the Bureau of Air and Waste. And finally, Mr. John Handrahan, who is the Deputy Regional Director for the Bureau of Wayside Cleanup. That is actually a bureau that on the evening of the 16th of February, our emergency response staff responded and took the cue and stood back following incident command protocol, which basically calls for the fire department, the chief, to serve as the incident commander. Mass DP is there on standby with hazmat, and also the U.S. Coast Guard made an appearance that night to monitor conditions. So with that, I'd like to introduce Greg Cooper, and he will call upon John and Seth as needed as per any questions. Thank you so very much for the invitation, and we will continue to be here to follow this important case through. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Cooper.
Oh, no, thank you. President Berkey and the City Council members appreciate us getting the opportunity to talk here tonight. Obviously, I wish I wasn't here, but I am. I thought it would be helpful just to kind of cover a little bit of items that relate to DEP's actions both during the event and subsequently, just to get some basis for those who may not have had an opportunity to look at all the information out there. But as Millie said, at the time of the fire, DEP's emergency response was contacted. We arrived at the facility within the hour, met up with our hazmat team, the State Department of Fire Services hazmat team, as is typical, and went about using handheld air monitors during the fire. That's basically standard protocol. The monitors are typically performed to assess whether chemical levels in the air pose explosive, asphyxiation, or immediate acute toxic risk. So we assisted the hazmat team in screening ambient air for total volatile organic compounds, as well as oxygen levels, carbon monoxide, hydrogen sulfide, and methane using photoionization detector and 4 gas meters. No significant readings were obtained at that time, and that information was reported to the incident commander through the hazmat team to the fire chief. The clean water stormwater treatment system was shut down to prevent any water from leaving the site. There's a catch basin area there to control that liquid should it occur. So all the resulting firefighting water was contained within Clean Harbors site. Mass DEP emergency response staff did not see any discharge of firefighting water to the Fall River, and no visible sheen on the river was observed the night of the incident. Later on, as we know, the firefighting water was pumped from the containment area into holding tanks. The air monitoring aspect of it, there has been some information. There's both the air monitoring that occurred the night of the event with our staff, hazmat, the Coast Guard. There was also monitoring done later on the next day by Clean Harbors. I'll let them speak to that. And I think the mayor and the police and the fire department was present for some of that monitoring. But just to give you a little idea about additional monitoring that was going on. So and to give you a little background about what that monitoring is. So Mass DEP operates a network of 23 ambient air quality monitoring stations across the Commonwealth as part of a comprehensive program to provide information about air quality to the public and to determine compliance with national ambient air quality standards. The Weymouth station is part of this network. These monitors continuously monitor ozone, nitrogen dioxide, and fine particulate matter. In addition, 4 of those 23 locations, Weymouth being one of them, also collect 24-hour volatile organic compound canisters samples and 24-hour carbonyl cartridge samples every 6th day. The volatile organic, in total, this measures 60 individual volatile organic compounds and 5 carbonyls. The sampling for the week at the Weymouth monitoring started at 12 a.m. on February 17th. So right during the fire. We sample once a week for a 24-hour period. There was also 7 citizen-operated purple sensors in and around the Fore River Basin, which we access that information as others can also through the website. These sensors measure particulate matter and provide useful air quality data, but do not have the precision and accuracy of the DEP Weymouth monitor. Millie talked about the response and the process and Clean Harbors required to, hire a licensed site professional to work on the aftermath of the incident, the remediation and the cleanup. Through our on-site coordination with the licensed site professional of record, which was retained by Clean Harbors, it resulted in an approval initially, verbally, for the following response actions under its immediate response action plan that's required. We authorized soil removal, if necessary, up to 50 cubic yards. That included the asphalt pavement of the area where the fire took place, application of absorbents, product recovery, which is the firefighting water and the waste that's discarded material, sufficient cleanup of asphalt surfaces, so the asphalt surfaces were all cleaned, degreasers, power washed, and that water was collected also, and an evaluation of all impacted asphalt surfaces for any indication that the integrity of that surface material may have been compromised. And then the assessment activities that go along with that. So that, just to follow, and a couple other things, I'll go to the approval sections of what has been issued through Mass DEP. On the 26th of February, we issued a limited approval to Clean Harbors for the removal and management of existing hazardous waste that was on the site. Was not involved in the fire, but it was on site and needed to be moved. And also to properly manage the firefighting water and the waste from the incident itself. Clean Harbors can provide an update on where they are, but they're making progress, the containerized stuff and materials, and they're moving those to proper disposal. On March 9th, we authorized Clean Harbors to activate its stormwater treatment system. After it had gotten revamped with new materials to activate it, we needed to do that because there was a significant amount of rainwater and snowmelt that was accumulating in the containment area. But we weren't going to do that, let that to be left to go out anywhere until it went through that stormwater treatment system of Clean Harbors, which is an EPA permitted stormwater treatment system. And then lastly, on March 15th, we authorized the resumption of activities at Clean Harbors for, and I think at the last meeting, Clean Harbors mentioned they have 3 distinct kind of operations. One is called the bulk loading operation. The other is drum storage activities. These activities do not take place where the fire occurred. They're in different buildings. And we did restrict we did not authorize the activation of the truck-to-truck, what we would call the truck-to-truck operation, which that is the building 6 where the fire occurred, and the trucks in the dock next to that. That activity is still not in operation now, and will not go into operation until we kind of have a chance to come to an agreement on what type of safeguards need to be put in place so that this incident doesn't happen again. So with that, and just, we are obviously under an ongoing investigation relative to compliance of the facility, relative to the incident. And my folks and the region, Millie's inspectors have been present at the facility on a number of occasions to gather information relative to that investigation. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cooper. Counselors, I'll open it up for questions. Counselor Hume?
Thank you, Mr. Cooper. So your team got on site an hour after the fire started, is that correct?
I think it was, as far as I could tell from the fire incident report, Melanie, if you want,
That's correct. Emergency responders are at home, and they are paged by MEMA. By the time that the emergency responder gets the MEMA page, mobilizes, and travels and gets to the site, that would be, in this case, approximately 1 hour after the fire.
So, and then at what point were the handheld air monitors?
That's the standard protocol. Once we get in, we check in with the incident commander and let them know of the activities, ensuring that we're not standing in the way of the blaze. That's the most important thing, safety first. And in the same time, we just don't intervene with that effort. We are working in tandem with hazmat, in this case also the U.S. Coast Guard, Sector Boston, who made an appearance and joined in and commenced the monitoring of the air for safety endpoint parameters.
So how long, like, at what point when your team arrived did the air monitors go into effect and start recording information?
Staff geared up and started working towards obtaining information using the 4 gas meter and the PID.
So like hour, 15
Probably
minutes?
probably 20 minutes, half an hour.
20 minutes?
Once they check in, they get going and mobilize.
If you can just come to the mic, introduce yourself. Sure.
John Handerhan, Deputy Regional Director for the Bureau of Wayside Cleanup in the Southeast region. So our emergency responder, as they approached the facility, approximately 1:45 to midnight that night, pulled off the side of the road to one of the car dealerships on Route 53 to turn on his air monitors and to start collecting data at that point in time. These monitors go through an initial calibration process that it's best to calibrate them outside of any potential contaminants. So our monitors were turned on Route 53, and then the emergency responder proceeded down the road to the Clean Harbors facility, where the monitors remained on, activated on him the entire time.
Okay, if I can continue to.
Go right ahead, Counselor.
In this report that we received, we had it in email, and then it's here on our desk tonight, too. It mentions the meteorological conditions that night and the wind direction. And 16.18% of the time, the monitoring station was getting a wind. Are these the tests that you're referring to, these monitors, these handheld monitors, or is this the testing site on the other side of the river basin, right? And that's what, okay.
It's the Weymouth monitoring station.
Right, okay. And then there was the purple monitors that are stationed around.
Yep.
How do these handheld, because the way I'm reading it, and I'm no expert, so correct me if I'm wrong, that this air monitoring station that was only getting the wind 16.18% of the time is probably the best and most accurate? Is that fair? Accurate?
Yes.
Okay.
Relative to the other measurements that the purple sensors.
So how
yes.
effective, reliable are these handheld ones that were around, closest to the site? And correct me if I'm wrong there.
So I would offer that there's 2 different purposes here relative to the use of instrumentation that we've described. The handheld monitoring instrumentation is akin to the one that fire services would use, hazmat would use, which is really focused on protecting the worker. That basically addresses flammability, any kind of oxygen deficiency in the ambient air that the responder is breathing. That's what the purpose of that particular monitor is designed to do, versus our discussion relative to more sophisticated ambient air monitoring that, that basically provides data generated by this monitor that is located in Weymouth. And also we have the purple sensors that actually, again, separate and apart, not to be confused with the field instrumentation.
So which one of these monitoring systems captured that hour that it was burning? Captured it best and went into the air and where it went and what it was?
So there was two things. The Weymouth Air Monitoring Station monitors PM and the other materials that I mentioned on a on a regular basis. So that was capturing it from 10 a.m. or from 10 p.m. when the fire started all the way through that 3-hour period. And you'll see in the graphs that there's data representing what that Weymouth monitoring station was receiving. The purple air sensors are ongoing also. And they're operated by citizens actually predominantly, or maybe some municipalities might have them planted, put them themselves. And those are hourly also. They can even be, the standard that we have is the National Air Ambient Air standards, and that's done on a 1-hour basis. So if you look at those graphs in there, you'll see we provided the 1-hour kind of federal standard for ambient air, but then we also provided information on what the monitors were reading at 10 minutes, at 10-minute intervals. And you can see that at those times, for that short duration of time, the monitors were above the ambient air standards of 35 micrograms per cubic meter.
Just for residents, either here or at home, the report that Mr. Cooper is referencing, which we have hard copies of, you can access right now online, Mass DEP, Braintree Clean Harbors. This is one of the links if people want to look for it for themselves, just so that's clear for everyone. Sometimes it's hard to follow along graphs when you can't see them. So thank you for letting me interrupt, Mr. Cooper.
Sure, no problem. I'll have Seth Pickering provide a little bit more detail.
And please introduce yourself and your affiliation.
Sure,
Thank
Madam
you.
President. Seth Pickering, Mass DEP. I'm the Deputy Regional Director for the Bureau of Air and Waste in the Lakeville office. So, Madam Councilwoman, the Mass DEP monitor in Weymouth monitors a couple of different pollutants 24/7. It also collects meteorological data 24/7. So your question was looking at this graph. This is called the windrows. Is that what you were looking at?
Looking at all of them, but okay.
Yep. So when you look at this, it shows the wind direction, and the lines indicate where the wind is coming from, not where it's going towards, in case you were curious about that. So you can see that this is identifying what the wind speeds and directions were essentially during the event. And they were variable from really almost 360, degrees difference, different directions at times. So does that help with your question?
Yep, I'm good.
Good, okay. Other questions from the council? Councilor Maglio.
Thank you very much. I have a couple of questions. I don't think I heard you mention, who is the licensed site professional? Who was it that night?
John?
That's waste site cleanup?
Yeah, Clean Harbors had, that night, Clean Harbors, their internal LSP, Keith Sullivan, was providing LSP services, but they have subsequently, the LSP of record for the site right now is Tom Nuno.
Okay, so I'm sorry, can you say that a little slower? So there was
Sure.
there was somebody on site from Clean Harbors that was their licensed site professional.
Correct.
But that's not who is that's not who the DEP LSP is.
Sure. The LSP that we are anticipating submittals coming in from is Tom Nuno of Tetra Tech.
Oh,
Clean Harbors is somewhat unique in that most people that have fires like this don't have their own internal LSPs, so they are somewhat unique. They had their own team that night, but they have subsequently transferred those responsibilities to off-site consultants.
And so DEP hired Tetra Tech or Clean Harbors?
Clean Harbors hires them. DEP does not hire the LSPs. The property owners for these incidents hire the LSPs.
Okay. The canisters that you collected, are those reports available as to what the readings were in the canisters?
Yes, those are actually on the website.
They are on the
With
website?
the Excel sheets. There's 60 constituents in there, so a graph would have looked a little funky. So we just put the spreadsheets themselves up there for the VOCs.
Okay.
And the carbonyls.
So here's my question. We hear about the handheld, and it was the handheld readings that were given to us as a reason as to why everyone went home and everyone was safe. But we're also hearing that the handheld monitors were really just for that close proximity to keep first responders safe. So if you lived 3 houses away, those handheld monitors really weren't there for you for beyond that direct perimeter. So that leaves a pretty big neighborhood pretty exposed and with very little air testing happening, except the second method, which you've mentioned, which is the purple air monitors, which many of us have at our homes. And that showed a dramatic, tremendous spike. Now, I know you think that it wasn't for that long or that significant, but it was. And we know that because we see the pictures, we have the data, it's pictured everywhere. You've even mentioned it in your reports. Now, when you take that spike that happened for an hour, and you average it over 24 hours that it didn't happen, that's when the number goes down. But we're not interested in the 23 hours that the fire wasn't happening. We're interested in what we were breathing in when the fire was happening. And then in the direction that the plume went, what they continue to breathe in. And now, the Tetra Tech guy that was overdoing the air readings, I'm sure he's very great, and I'm thrilled that he was there. Thank you for sending him. But that was a week after it happened. Nothing was still in the air. At that point, it was all in the ground. So who's testing the ground? Who's testing the water? And I appreciate that you didn't see any water go in, but 400,000 gallons of water being poured from 2 different ladders when there's a plume of fire, and the fire departments are, what did they say, circling it or dousing it? I'm sorry. The fact that somebody on site said, nah, I didn't see any go in there, isn't that reassuring at all?
Okay. So there are a lot of themes that you have articulated in that one statement, so I'd like to go one by one, if I recall them correctly. I do want to first make a point, a fine-tuned point that I believe is extremely important. It has to do with licensed site professionals. LSPs in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts are licensed by very separate and apart board. DEP is not responsible for providing licensed site professionals. These are individuals experienced in the field of hazardous waste, and they take a test, they get a license, they render opinions. They're hired by potential responsible parties or individuals that need to be responsive for understanding, assessment, and doing all the remediation. So that's the LSP issue. And they sign under the pains and perjury when they render documents. In this case, an LSP, a third-party LSP, was retained by Clean Harbors just to ensure that there was a separate set of eyes. Mass DEP has not yet received the document that's incoming to the department. Once a party notifies with the department, we grant, in this case, 60 days to collect the necessary information, to process and analyze the information, to do whatever necessary risk assessment needs to be done. That information is filed with the department. In this case, it's due on 28 April 2023. So we will be looking for that information, and the public actually can access that information too when they reference the release tracking number for this site. It's instantaneously, once uploaded, it's for everybody to see through our eDEP portal. Okay, going into the theme with regards to the handheld instrumentation and the fact that the data as it pertains to that incident did not reveal any kinds of spikes. However, not interested in that moment in time, but rather, just focusing on the 1 hour versus the 23 hours. That is part of the work that Mass DEP has confirmed and committed to doing with regards to the study that you requested, the DEP-DPH study, to basically look at the information and better ascertain risk assessment associated with the data that we have and how that actually results in any potential human health risks. So we would be looking at acute versus any kind of post-acute or more chronic risk.
And
So
is that the report, I'm sorry to interrupt, is that the report that's due on April 28th?
separate and apart, the LSP report may answer some of those questions, but I believe that you have asked separate and apart and independently for the
With the
arms of
DPH.
government, DEP and DPH, to take a closer look. And we are currently coordinating and basically just trying to understand what is the information telling us so we can better inform and answer your question.
Could I ask a question just right there? Just
Sure.
So they're open, but you're still assessing the risks that
Yes,
we
that's
may
part-
have experienced that night.
Right,
And
whether
that we
it's-
may be experiencing every day when we go home. And
Exactly. So it's
Yeah,
basically
okay.
using limited information, albeit limited, just to model that moment in time.
Mm-hmm.
Using classic risk assessment models that take into account exposure duration, inhalation rates, et cetera. So that's really what the risk assessment model is, points to.
Is there a risk reduction model?
I'm not familiar with the risk reduction model.
That would be the soil and the soot and everything that could be on the ground that could be revealed from
Okay,
your
so
study.
we're getting into some of the information that the licensed site professional is going to be
Gotcha.
rendering when they render their opinion. They will be looking at soil pathway, groundwater pathway, air pathway. All that information is going to be contained within an immediate response plan.
Have they taken
statement.
samples yet?
I am not sure because we kind of stand back and we provide the licensed site professional with the necessary space and time and latitude to do what they need to do to determine the nature and extent of contamination.
The licensed site professional that works for Clean Harbors?
That is correct. And Mass DEP is in an auditing review role when we get it. If we see deficiencies, we will call them out. That's how the private types program works for
Wow.
the cleanup program. It's been
Okay.
at play for over 20 years in the Commonwealth.
And that tells us what, the 20 years?
The 20 years tells us that there's a lot of faith that we place in these licensed site professionals, and this was the first in the nation model to actually be mimicked and modeled by many states, including Connecticut, California, and many other states.
So it's a model that talks about the risk that people went through at an incident that they could currently still be going
So
through.
the program, the actual privatization of the program is the model that serves to provide licensed site professionals with
I
the
gotcha.
opportunity to then get into answer those questions. Assessing what is in the ground, determining if there's an exposure pathway that's feasible, and what does that mean with regards to human health risk or environmental risk.
So I appreciate that. That's important to know, but you have to, I mean, obviously.
And we're not discounting at all.
I'm sorry?
We're not discounting your concerns.
Yeah, because, I mean, it's a little, I have some cynicism about whether Clean Harbors is going to say Clean Harbors is contaminating the children of East Braintree. So,
Understood.
Councilor Maglio, may I?
Yes.
I just want to make sure that we have clarity here. So the licensed site professional is being paid for, that their salary or this contract is being paid for by Clean Harbors, but the licensed site professional who deals with hazardous waste pathways and whatnot is not working for Clean Harbors. They're just being paid for by Clean Harbors?
No, they're supposed to be like hiring an engineer and having an engineer stamp on something.
That's right.
That license that they own and they get licensed through our board. They're putting their license into the assessment they're responsible for doing. So Clean Harbors is paying for them, yes.
Right.
But they're doing it with their license stamped on it.
Right. So Madam President, I serve as the chair of the Commonwealth's Licensed Site Professional Board. In Massachusetts, we have approximately 500 licensed site professionals. There's a lot of scrutiny associated with the type of work that's rendered. Mass DEP, again, separate and apart from this board, that its only job is to license individuals. They need to take a test, pass the test. They need to renew their license every 3 years. There's a lot of bells and suspenders and whistles here. Mass DEP, when that report comes in from a licensed site professional, has the authority to actually audit and review, reject, deny, enforce against any potential misrepresentations based on what we know in our experience. So we have LSPs, DEP, and the board working together to ensure that we have better command and understanding of environmental conditions at a site.
Okay. And that report, thank you for that clarification. That report is due to be complete on April 28th. Yep. And can that be also uploaded to the special Braintree Clean Harbors website so that it's easy for residents to find?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. And then there was a second report that I believe Councilor Maglio had requested through formal channels. That's separate and apart from the licensed site professional report. When is that report expected?
So we're still in the planning phases. We're still trying to understand the scope and extent of what this exercise will look like. But again, we have captured all the concerns and the goals and the questions that you want answered, and that's part of the process right now. We are working actively with the Department of Public Health, the Bureau of Environmental Health Assessment.
If we can get an update, at least on timeline, within the next month on when we can expect to see that. I know these things take a long time to coordinate with public agencies, but we want to make sure that it's progressing.
Absolutely.
And thank you to Councilor Maglio for making that formal request.
Yeah, I would just add that, that is to look at all the data and information provided, so the information from the LSPs can plug into that assessment of both our Office of Research and Standards and Mass DPA.
Thank you. Councilor Flaherty?
Thank you. You went to so much trouble to ensure that the site was cleaned up and to be sure that all the hazardous waste materials were, on the ground there, were properly cleaned up and disposed of the way that they should. So my question is, and you've alluded to some, but is there a similar plan in place to ensure that the chemical particulate that moved through our environment from the air onto the ground or the water, or from the ground into the water, as the case may be, depending on how much time elapses, is there a plan to identify those locations where it lands and then clean it up before it moves away or sinks into the ground? And how do you deploy those cleanup efforts? Like, what would residents look to expect from you?
Well, I think the first thing is to determine whether, what contaminants leave the site and in what degree they left the site and where did they go. And that is part of the LSP's responsibility to kind of make that determination. If that determination is found, then that turns into part of the remediation project that needs to be implemented through the responsible party under the MCP.
I would also add that every site is very different. In this case, the fire took place in an area that was 100% paved for the most part. So the sudden release of oil hazardous materials may not have migrated too deeply based on the fact that we had a barrier. But Mass DEP does not want to prejudge or dictate how the licensed site professional is going to be answering those very questions that you're asking. We've had, for example, it's very different when you have a situation where you have a tractor rollover with sudden release of X number of gallons of oil onto the ground, for example, or contaminating a pond. That is definitely inflicting a lot of greater environmental injury because you have materials that actually may have very quickly leached into the groundwater. So we're going to find out. We're going to wait for that report. and we will be just focusing on every single potential exposure pathway. I don't know if John has anything else to add based on limited information that we have as of today, but we will have a lot more clarity coming up.
One moment, Counselor. Counselor Flaherty, did you have a follow-up?
So the problem that we have in the Fall River Basin is that we have a lot of industry, and it seems, I think one of the things that residents fear is that none of the industries necessarily produce a whole bunch all at once, although this fire is kind of an a moment when that did happen. But that it leaves trace amounts everywhere that the people who live in the community are exposed to in low levels for such a long period of time that it causes long-term health problems of all kinds. And so my concern is that the LSP will produce a study that shows where the pollutants went, but it will show it in a low enough quantity that it won't trigger a cleanup effort. And so my question right now is, what levels would trigger a cleanup effort? And as I understand it, you're saying that the Clean Harbors themselves would be responsible for cleaning it up, which is their specialty, so I can understand how that might be. But then how would you enforce the extent and the nature of the cleanup that would be required?
If the contamination was related to the Clean Harbors release, the LSP report will identify what materials left site and where they went. And they'd have to have a remediation response plan to follow up on those activities.
So I will tack on a little bit more, which is the mass contingency plan, which is sort of the book that the set of regulations that guides how clean is clean, specific to chemical by chemical, offers the maximum concentration of contaminants that can still be allowed in the environment without any injury to health. I would be more than happy to provide you with, for each chemical that at least we are aware of, and again, this is why it's so important that we get the information from the licensed site professional. They're responsible with ensuring that there's no excess contamination left behind in excess of the numbers, the numerical risk-based numbers that are stipulated in our regulation. This is an urban environment. Even in environments that are not urban, we do have certain levels of contamination. And therefore, our job is to ensure that based on the science, based on the risk levels that have been calculated, if there's an association of chemicals that, again, was introduced to the environment as a result of the fire, we need to make sure that we don't leave that contaminated media out there. And these numerical standards help us make that decision as to how clean is clean. And I will be more than happy to provide that information because it's readily available in our regulation in the subparts that follow both the concentrations that require notification when you have a sudden release, as well as the concentrations that need to be met when an LSP is rendering an opinion saying there's no significant risk or there is significant risk, and therefore I need to clean up the soil or the water to the levels that Mass DEP stipulates. So it would be my pleasure to provide that information.
Okay, and one final question. Because there is so much industry in this smallish area, and many of the chemicals that the various industries use overlap one another, and if you found through this study the presence of a chemical, say benzene, for example, how would you know whether the benzene came from the Clean Harbors fire or if it was the product of one of the many other industrial companies in the area?
Predicated on where you sample, if it's in close proximity to the place where the fire took place, one would argue that it's attributable to the release. But again, any kind of tractor rollover, any kind of accident, we've got chemicals, gasoline, MTBE, that could have been released into the environment, and it would be very hard to discern where that contamination came from. But when we find contamination and we have a party that is responsible for the contamination, we have standards that we can use to ensure that that cleanup is done in a protective way. So we will be pursuing that, and we will be waiting for that report to come in, and we will be auditing that report.
Okay. Thank you, Councilor Flaherty. Any other councilors? Councilor Maglia for the second time?
So I caught something in what you mentioned. So just a quick question. Is the LSP going to go through all of the manifests, chemical by chemical? Okay.
Yes.
That was a
And-
yes, just for the
That's a yes.
microphones.
That's a yes.
So what I heard you say is, if it's identified and can be attributed to Clean Harbors, so given the amount, and this kind of piggybacks off of Councilor Flaherty's question, given the amount of industry that has been sandwiched into a very tiny part of the world that has all been approved by you, by DEP, it would seem as though whether it's the Clean Harbors LSP that finds it and whether it's related to Clean Harbors or not, that DEP ultimately is responsible.
Responsible for the release?
For anything they're doing that is impacting our health, for anything Citgo is doing, for any agency that you regulate that operates in a way above that maximum allowable, given the cumulative nature of the toxins that are being released every day, but some of them are at 4 and some of them are at 8 and some of them are at 12, therefore you're not looking at that cumulative impact.
Okay, I get where you're going.
So
yes.
when I have residents that are calling me saying, is it safe to go in my yard? Can I plant tomatoes this year? Should I eat my basil? Should my kids take their shoes off outside? Please tell me, what do I tell them?
You can tell them that predicated, and again, I think, it's a risk communication question, answer, because explaining risk and non-cancer, cancer risk is extremely difficult, which is why Mass DEP has enlisted Mass DPH. But I can definitely tell you that when it comes to the sudden release of oil hazardous materials, as in the case that happened here, we are going to be using the information that the licensed site professional is providing us to make the determination if there's something to be explained about significant risk. I can tell you that it is very possible that past releases may have occurred without anybody even noticing. It's just how the urban setting works. Is it acceptable? Is DEP there? We don't know if there's a release to the environment that Mass DEP is not aware, but I can definitely tell you that in this case, there was a release that happened. We have a licensed site professional that is responsible for ensuring that we know all about potential soil, groundwater, air, and that's the information that we need to go to and go by when we're trying to explain risk. We cannot look backwards because we don't have scientific information, quantitative information to have a thoughtful, very important, very delicate conversation. But what we can tell you is that at Mass DEP, we evaluate risk from the moment that there's a release to the environment, moving forward, prospectively, not retrospectively.
There was a health impact assessment that was done in this community, and it was done before the compressor was authorized. And it was done based on all of the industry that exists, all of the industry licensed and authorized by you. And that health impact assessment, you should take a look at it, because it talks about the high rates of cancer, asthma, Parkinson's. It talks about all the things that are going on in this community from the toxins. We are an environmental justice designated area because of the poisons we are breathing every day.
So I have taken a look at that. I would love to have a conversation with you. What I learned...
I want it fixed. I don't want a conversation, I want it fixed.
What I can tell you is that the Department of Public Health is the right entity to look at cancer risk. They work directly with cancer registries.
But you're authorizing them, and they're doing the research. So I'll let it go right now, but
it's complicated. It's many arms of government.
and deadly.
And I appreciate your concern. And again, we are taking your concern very seriously, which is why DEP and DPH are
appreciate
working
it.
together.
And Counselor, thank you, Ms. Serrano Garcia. And Counselor, will we can get DPH on a future agenda as well, so.
All of this. And I
Yep.
think
We were.
they were there, I think they were there that night. Chief, was the board of, it said that.
Counselor, if I
Yeah,
might, let me
yes,
just
yes,
finish
yes,
with Mass DEP, please.
Yeah.
I have a few questions, changing tacks a little bit. What is the role of OSHA in all of this? And were they there? Can you help me understand where OSHA fits in here?
OSHA is worker safety. There was not an incident that warranted reporting to OSHA, at least as it pertains to injury. But OSHA also has a preventive arm, which is basically ensuring that any kind of workers that are working at the Clean Harbors facility are basically protected. So Clean Harbors has a responsibility to provide for a safe environment, correct indoor air, training, all that has to do with worker safety and protection.
Okay, thank you. And then in your letter that allows for, I guess I would say, 2/3 resumption of operations at Clean Harbors, you wrote, and I don't have it in front of me, so I'm going off my memory here, that inspections by DEP will be done annually. I was frankly concerned and surprised that you're only going to be doing an inspection annually. I'd like to understand why you're going 12 months at a time or 364 days at a time without re-inspecting, whether it's Clean Harbors or some of these other sites.
Yeah, so I can answer that. We basically, we have a certain number of resources that we do. We have a certain number of requirements that we need to meet with the EPA. They fund part of our efforts. One of those issues is for these types of facilities, TSDFs, treatment storage disposal facilities, that EPA requires us to inspect those every other year. Mass DEP, because of state law, inspects those facilities every year. We also obviously respond to complaints. I mean, if there's any sign or notice that comes in, we have a complaint line and we're taking complaints. But we have about 9 of these TSDFs across the state, but we also have obligations to inspect all of the business entities that are generating the waste that's being received at these facilities to make sure they're properly handling it on their site before it gets picked up and taken to one of these TSDFs for final treatment and transfer and disposal. So there's several hundred of those operations that are large quantity generators, which we have to go to a certain percentage of every year, and there's thousands of small quantity generators, which we respond predominantly to complaints on, but we also do random inspections at some of them also.
Okay, thank you for that.
Oh,
I'm sorry, can you say that into the microphone?
The Southeast region has 5 compliance inspectors in the region that are responsible for the 84 communities and all the generators within, not just hazardous waste generators, but air sources, asbestos, other response items that will be called to.
So it sounds like Mass DEP probably needs more funding. My last question is, You heard from the mayor earlier tonight that one of our top priorities is to assist with an evacuation plan or get in addition to air quality monitors. Is that a service or something that Mass DEP has expertise in and/or does for communities or assists with for communities?
Actually, it is not. It falls under MEMA.
MEMA, okay.
But I do know, for the facilities that are in the area, and I'm certain that, they would be happy to cooperate, and we're obviously willing to cooperate too and participate in that. But I think the greatest value in terms of coordinating a regional emergency management plan would come from, as the fire chief said, getting folks from the communities together, having some assistance from MEMA on how this can be handled collectively would make a lot of sense. And we would be happy to participate in what capacity we can.
Thank you for that. I'm sorry, Councilor O'Brien, I apologize. Right ahead.
Don't be sorry. Thank you. Ms. Garcia Serrano, or is it Serrano? I'm sorry. Mr. Cooper, Mr. Pickering, and Mr. Handringham, I want to thank you for coming. I have a feeling that the audience is not going to be as silent as we have been, even though there has been a number of issues brought forth. But I certainly see some residents in the area that are affected, and they've been talking for a long time. And in fact, there's been a lot of echoes that have not come back. There's no responses that come back. I have letters dated from 2017 reaching out to you folks, asking for some air quality tests. And in fact, one of the letters which was sent is regarding the Fall River Basin, which has 10 polluting facilities located in a small geographic area. Now, you keep using the word urban, but I live here, and to me, this is suburban. It's not urban. Quincy is urban. We're suburban. And so there's 10 in this small area, and you still went ahead and approved a facility, a compressor station, along with the EPA, along with others, that our federal legislators came out finally, after, of course, it's already up and running, and said it shouldn't be there. But the Baker administration didn't do anything. They just sat by, they stood by. I think you guys were there with the Baker administration, you still are, and yet that polluting facility is still over there. I don't know what the last one was, but it's still experiencing blow-down alerts. And my understanding also from the folks in the audience is that, got to put my glasses on to read this part, is that the Enbridge, maybe I can't, Enbridge Gas Transmission Compressor Station has been approved by DEP and the Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration, despite 2 significant unplanned releasing toxic methane and VOCs into the environment of the Fall River Basin. This multiple violating polluter poses a threat to the Citgo facility and should be considered as you progress, but of course you've already progressed. There's also an issue in here that states that Mass DEP in their air permits do not consider cumulative impacts of multiple polluting facilities in a geographic area such as the Fall River Basin. Is that true?
Yes, that is, and we
So
actually...
how do we rely on you representing us when you're not considering the cumulative effects? And if you've ever been out on the, and I'm sorry, just one more thing. If you've ever been out on the water out there, or if you haven't, I would request that you go out in that water. I mean, there are so many facilities out there, you can clearly see the oil tanks. We have 2 gas turbines running our electricity in our grid, which is great for us, however, producing problematic air. And all of the things that our previous speaker talked about have been going on for years. In fact, one of these letters that I wrote to you folks came from 50 years of experience of people that are sitting in the audience.
Thank you. What I can definitely tell you is that as a result of all the comments and the most recent climate bill, there is a cumulative impact assessment guidance and a tool that is currently available for public comment. The public comment period ends on April 7th. We heard you. We've learned the lessons, and we have provided a draft guidance tool for the public to comment because we're now considering cumulative impacts as part of this law. It's not guidance, it's not policy, it's the law. Thank you.
Could you please send us that link so that we can get that out
It
to
would
the
be my
residents?
pleasure.
Thank you.
It would be my pleasure.
Counselor O'Brien, are you set for now?
Yeah, I'm not satisfied, so
Well,
I know.
did you have
Thanks,
another
thanks for not-
question?
Thank you for not using that term, but yes, for now. Thank you.
Okay. Any other counselors have questions for DEP? Counselor Flaherty?
It's not exactly a question. It sounds to me like you're enforcing the minimum, and I have to say that I'm so tired of just the minimum. I was a teacher for a long time before now, and I had, most kids didn't ask me for their grade, but there were two kinds that did. One was A students. They wanted an A and not an A minus, and they checked all the time. And the other student that asked me all the time about their grade were the D minus students, because they wanted a D minus and not to fail. And that is how I feel this fire is being treated. I think the Braintree residents deserve to know that they're safe and that the air they're breathing is clean, and the best path that I see to getting there is through the implementation of air quality monitoring. And East Braintree is part of the Four River Basin, which shoulders more than its fair share of industrial properties, and residents have been asking for years for air quality monitoring. And I think they should get it. And I think it's more than fair for the industrial companies themselves to shoulder the financial cost of monitoring the pollutants they produce or that they might produce if things go wrong. But unfortunately, these companies, they've been unwilling to contribute to these efforts, and I'm sure that that's because of the cost, but also I suspect that the reluctance is related to a concern that closer monitoring might turn up more violations. So I think it's been a real missed opportunity for the Mass DEP to fail to take this opportunity to require the entities they regulate to take some responsibility for helping to keep the communities that they are meant to protect safe.
Thank you, Counselor Flaherty. Any other questions for Mass DEP? Okay, thank you for being with us this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we now have, up next is our Clean Harbors. I know Becky Underwood is with us again, and if you don't mind reintroducing yourself. And thank you for accepting the invitation to be here tonight.
So my name is Becky Underwood. I'm the president of facilities for Clean Harbors. I'm joined by Mike Foley, who's the senior vice president of facilities for Clean Harbors. And we also have Dyron Hamlin, who is our expert air modeling representative from GDH. So good evening, Madam President, Mayor, Town Council members, Fire Chief, Massachusetts DEP, and all the residents here with us tonight. Thank you for inviting us back. Tonight we're going to share the status of our operations. We're going to respond to the questions and concerns that you raised the last time we had the Town Council meeting. First, we'd like to say that there has been a lot of misinformation that's been shared out there, and we think it's very important to provide accurate information, for all the residents and make sure that everybody is properly informed. In these types of situations, we think it's important for everyone to share with us, or for us to share and be as transparent as possible. Sure can, thanks. Maybe that's better. I know most of you are familiar with Clean Harbors, as we shared last time, but I did want to share again for those of you who are just joining us tonight. Our Braintree facility provides essential environmental services for businesses, communities throughout New England, including the town of Braintree, the city of Quincy, as well as the town of Weymouth. We provide these critical services to safely manage waste for our customers. I think it's important to note that we don't create most of this waste. We are actually here to manage it safely. Our customers are not equipped to handle significant amounts of accumulated waste. And so, as you can imagine, as we've gone through this incident and as we continue to respond to the incident, it's important that we're here to provide these essential services for our customers. These customers include Braintree residents, so folks like yourself, you bring your household hazardous waste to us, local businesses, hospitals, utilities, schools, municipalities. Everyone relies on us and looks to Clean Harbors to dispose of their waste safely and compliantly. This is our business, and we're experts at it. Over the years, we've made significant investment in the Braintree facility. We've invested in things like upgrading our fire protection. We've replaced aging equipment and buildings with energy-efficient technology. And we've also provided and invested in an additional fire truck for the town of Braintree that has special equipment to better support and respond to fires throughout the community. We are committed to being a collaborative partner and living our mission of Clean Harbors, which is people and technology creating a better environment for the world we live in. Again, tonight we hope to answer and address some of the concerns that you have. I'd now like to invite Mike Foley and Dyron to the podium. They're going to actually discuss and update us on the site situation and site operations, as well as talk about air modeling, which I know we already talked a little bit about tonight, but we wanted to bring some more clarity there, as well as address some of the responses from the last meeting.
Thank you. Mr. Foley, you have the floor.
Thank you. Again, my name is Mike Foley. I'm a Senior Vice President of Facility Operations. So I'm going to go through a few things. Certainly the current status of the facility. Like Becky mentioned, I'll go through the question, and we try to summarize the questions that we got from the last town council meeting, so we did our best to kind of consolidate those into a kind of a smaller group, if you will. Then also talk a little bit about the root cause that we've ultimately got through our management team investigation, and then go through the corrective actions. So I'm going to just go through the current status first, and then I'll let Dyron speak a lot about the air modeling. I'm sure a lot of folks want to hear from him tonight. So from a current status standpoint, obviously the Mass DEP has opened us up to conduct business, normal bulk business, the drum management business, and then we're not currently doing the truck-to-truck as DEP stated earlier. So we are operating since last Wednesday. So all the waste from the trailer incident has been cleaned up. That material has been essentially removed from the site. We do have some roll-off containers that there was roughly 22 of those containers that we generated through the cleanup process. There is a few of those still remaining. Those are being transported off-site to the proper disposal facility. It does take quite an effort to move that amount of material. And once we get approval, we began that process, arranging transportation and ultimately rail transportation to get it to adult disposal. That'll be eliminated, all that fire debris, solid material, I'll call it, will be eliminated by essentially early next week. And that'll be done. From the water standpoint, obviously all the water was collected. We've had quite a few communications on how that water was collected. Roughly speaking, there was 22 tank quantities, frac tanks we call them, roughly 21,000 gallon containers that we pumped up all that water into. We're sitting at the site currently. There's roughly 12 of those still on site. So we've removed quite a bit of that water, roughly 88,000 gallons so far. And again, that takes a little bit of coordination from a transportation perspective. It also is governed by our ability to take that at the end disposal site, where they'll take that on a daily basis to ultimately process through all the 450,000 gallons roughly that'll need to be processed. So that'll take us another couple weeks to remove the rest of the water from the site. And again, that's just a process of transport at a pretty good distance. It's actually going down to one of our Louisiana facilities. So yeah, so that's kind of the status of the facility. I'll let Dyron speak a little bit more about the air. He has a lot of detail on that, and then I'll come back up and speak a little bit more about the root cause and corrective action.
Thank you, Mr. Foley. You can please introduce yourself.
Sure thing. So good evening. My name is Dyron Hamlin. Thank you all for allowing me the time to speak and tell you about the work that I've been doing on this. Thought I'd start with just a little background. So I work for an independent consulting firm, GHD. We're about 11,000 people worldwide, scientists, engineers, etc. I'm based out of Little Rock, Arkansas, so I might speak a little more slowly than folks from up here, but I apologize for that. I'll keep moving along as fast as I can. My mom is actually from Quincy, Mass., so have some roots in the area. Studied chemical engineering in school, so my background is in chemical engineering. I have a bachelor's and master's degrees in chemical engineering. My master's is from the University of Texas in Austin, so Southern through and through. You'll have to pardon me for that. I'm also a certified industrial hygienist, so if you're not familiar with the certification of a CIH, essentially our profession specializes in assessing risks to humans, to various exposures, both in the workplace and in the community. I thought I'd also mention I'm a father of 3, so anytime I'm asked to do this kind of work, I also look at it from that perspective. I know that's a main concern of your citizens and yourselves. I take my work very seriously, and I appreciate your patience. I know when I was here a couple of weeks ago, the question was posed, how quickly can we have this? I think my answer was as soon as possible. So in the spirit of an A student, I have been spending a lot of time with this and lost a few hours of sleep, trying to put the best assessment I could together for this incident in particular. And I mention that because for about 20 years, I've been responding to fires and spills and things, and you can start to look at them all kind of in the same way, and I wanted to be sure that I gave, this particular incident its due attention. So where do I start? I also do a lot of preventive work, so I take some of the lessons learned from those fires and incidents. I've had the chance, the opportunity, the good fortune, the bad fortune, however you might look at it, to respond to a lot of fires of this type all over North America primarily. So I am a recognized expert in exactly this type of incident. I do a lot of training with fire departments. I do a lot of testing of air quality in my kind of normal day-to-day business. So all that to say, all of that background goes into kind of where I start this assessment. So I thought I'd just give you like a brief 5-minute overview. I'm sure you're going to have lots of detailed technical questions. Happy to answer those, but rather than start there, I'll just give you my kind of big picture conclusions. The fire involved 3 trailers primarily. So when I look at that from a total mass perspective, if you think of 3 tractor trailers, compare that to maybe the size of a house, it's going to be roughly the same depending on the size of the house, maybe even a little smaller. So the total amount of material that was involved in this fire was not a great amount of material. So that's a pro. I also looked, a lot of times when a fire is happening, especially a large fire, I have the opportunity to be on site. I do a lot of on-site emergency responses for big fires. I have the opportunity to do measurements inside the plumes of those fires and chase plumes, and so I've done a lot of measurements similar to the work that DEP and the fire department did, and appreciate everything that they put into it. That helps me if I go back and try to recreate or reconstruct what exposures may have occurred, to have all of that information. So that played a part in my assessment as well, looking at the data that was collected, both for the safety purpose and then also the data that's regularly collected just to look at the air quality in the area. So other things that are very helpful to me these days that I didn't always have the benefit of using, so like 20 years ago, I didn't often have good pictures or photos or videos or whatever of the fire. So I had a lot of that to be able to look at. Twitter has become a good friend of mine. Anytime an incident happens for any one of our clients or in some part of the United States where I don't live, I'm able to get on Twitter and often, get a picture of what's going on. Picture's worth 1,000 words. And often that can give me a little guidance, especially with a fire. A fire is going to have some visible emissions associated with it, and that helps me kind of frame up, how big, how bad, and where materials may be being transported. Another thing that we had was the complete inventory from Clean Harbors to look at what products were in these trailers, what went up, how can we classify that, what could they have, how did it burn, and what kind of combustion byproducts can we imagine or estimate would have come from that fire. We also look back at some similar studies of other fires. Again, I mentioned the ones that I've responded to. There's also lots of studies out there, easily searchable and Googleable, that you can see all kinds of different combustion byproducts that you might expect from fires of similar types. And these are experiments and things, so I look at a lot of literature. And we're able to take all that, put it into a model. It's a mathematical model, and try to estimate downwind concentrations and to some degree the soot deposition that you could imagine or estimate would have resulted. So what did we find? Again, we estimated how much was there originally in those 3 trailers, how much remained after the trailers had been recovered, what was left out on site. And then, based on that, we can try to figure out how much went into the air. Those plume calculations help us estimate levels that may have been in the air, then particles and gases. Those are the 2 primary things that are going to be produced in a fire of this type. Fire is good in a sense. It's a very destructive process. So from a base hazard as it sits in the trailer prior to its being consumed by fire, it's going to have a totally different hazard than from when it is burned. Okay, so and you think of waste incineration, that's really the purpose of waste incineration, is to render these wastes inert. They cause them going from a hazardous material to a non-hazardous material. And that's by and large what you'll see in a hazardous materials fire. Like I said, I've tested the plumes of many, many fires throughout the years. When you look at the chemicals that were stored in those 3 trailers, a lot of the byproducts that are going to come from combustion of those materials is going to be very similar to what you might find in a house fire. Okay, in a house you have PVC pipes, you have metals, plastics, upholstery, possibly other fuels and things that are going to be burned in a fire. And there, again, are a lot of studies, not just my own experience, that would bear this out. In addition to actually just the simple burning of wood as an example. You hear a lot about, for example, dioxins and furans. Dioxins are produced from burning wood. And so you're going to end up with dioxins from any combustion process pretty much that happens. So that could include, again, house fires. It could include just a backyard fire. And there's a lot of studies that are available on that. So at the end of the day, I want to look at the endpoint or the fate of these emissions. So not only what was present in the air during the fire, which again, thankfully, we also reviewed the air quality data that was collected, not just the safety side, but also what was being collected in the community monitors, the purple air sensors that some of the community members have in their homes, and then compare that to the model results. Do the model results agree with the air quality sensor data? Because certainly I don't want to have a model that flies in the face of real data. So that was a good sort of guidance that was left for us. And then ultimately, what's the fate of the materials that were emitted? This mass went up in the air. Where did it go? Where did it end up? I know that's a big question. And we can do some estimates of what that deposition might look like, keeping in mind that the deposition of every other fire or combustion process that's happened in the area or distant from the area for all time will possibly and most probably have left the same types of materials deposited on surfaces. So based on all of that, what did we find? My conclusion would be that the emissions from this fire did not result in levels that would result in adverse health risks to the community. That includes both the air exposure during the fire, which I think is borne out by the air quality data, as well as any soot deposition that would have taken place. So I'll say that broadly. I'm sure you have lots of questions about how I arrived at that, but happy to answer those.
Mr. Foley, did you want to conclude with mitigation, and then we can open it up to all questions from Clean Harbors?
Yes, thank you. So I can try to get through some of the questions. Again, we try to consolidate them as best we could. There's probably some of them that we weren't able to list here, but I'll do my best to get through them. The first question is, what chemicals, materials were burned in the fire and at what quantities? And so, clearly there was three trailers. The main trailer had various containers of 5-gallon pails all the way up to 55-gallon drums on there. We had a complete list of all the waste classification codes and so forth. We provided that to, obviously, the fire department, DEP, and our fire consultants. So I think, again, various paints, household hazardous waste, and so forth. I think we answered that last time, but we're just kind of noting that. Next question was, did any fire water discharge into the Fall River? And so I think we've been, again, through that, but again, I'll reiterate the fact that the facility is designed to contain all the water, and it acted as it was designed. Almost the entire property is paved, and so all that water does get to the low point in the facility. It naturally flows to that low point. And then again, we pump that water into these portable tanks, which I refer to as frac tanks, that collected it, and we're disposing it off-site. What air monitoring was done, again, I think we've been through that quite extensively, but again, I think I'll just say that we've already answered those questions. I think we're pretty clear on that. How do we know the material, what the material was that was stored on the trailers? And again, we're trying to answer these questions as detailed as we can, but clearly all hazardous waste is manifested on a document from the Department of Transportation. It's called the manifest. It's a uniform hazardous waste manifest, and we're shipping all of our waste containers within the process of the Department of Transportation. So we have all that information on what was in those trailers. Is Clean Harbors allowed to store chemicals on park vans? The straight answer is yes. That is our truck-to-truck operation that we spoke about. We're currently not currently operating that process of the business. How critical is the amount of elapsed time? The question was between when the fire took place and the air modeling. So obviously we talked to our consultants on that, and Darren can further talk about that, but time is not that critical based on basically all the data that we've been able to collect from all the other air monitoring systems and our personal monitoring. So the time it took to kind of do air modeling, I don't think at all creates a problem with kind of ultimately examining what was released. Is there any further cleanup? I think we've been through that a little bit, but again, all our air monitoring and shows that there's no impact to the Fall River and the residents. So getting into the root cause, I think we've been this again, but we understand Mass DEP and others have really not concluded a source of the fire, but we've done our work on our side, and we wanted to get to a root cause. And so we reviewed the video footage of the dock. We had a video camera near that trailer. And we did note that there was a fire spontaneously ignited in the trailer, the first trailer. So we could see that on the video. We reviewed all the manifest, the profile, and the packet list for each of the containers on the trailer. We also took the data and had other people kind of separately review what was on that trailer. We have a waste acceptance group in the facility with a lot of technical chemistry-related background folks. They did their review. Health and safety managers, and everyone independently came up with the same conclusion, that there was one specific waste stream with a self-heating compound in it that was most likely the cause of this fire. There was no other material on that trailer that exhibited potential self-reacting type material. So again, it really took us back to this self-initiating material. There was no other indication that any of the containers were compromised on the trailer, as if the drums were compromised and potentially leaked and created a reaction by touching one another. So there was no evidence of any of that. And so, absent of any other viable source, our conclusion is that it was the self-initiating material. From a corrective action standpoint, all the material for the fire has been containerized, like I spoke about earlier, and we've got it all cleaned up. The pavement directly under the truck-to-truck dock area was all removed and containerized for off-site disposal. The area the fire water ponded in, obviously we power washed that all out and cleaned it. We also changed all the filtration media and the treatment media in our stormwater system, and we just packaged that up for proper disposal and replaced it. And so, as DP stated earlier, we did get approval to run our system again. And again, we have to run, we'll run this material through the system. We'll take our samples. We have to meet our discharge parameters, of which we did, and we'll continue to do that. And so, that's kind of where we are, corrective actions. there's a few others. What steps have been taken to prevent future incidents? We've shut the customer off. We're communicating directly with that customer to continue our management team investigation. We've basically removed that from the scenario. And then also, I think that it's important to note that we've been operating for 40 years in this location, and we have a really good record. We had a serious incident here. We recognize that, but we do consider ourselves experts. And we're confident that this won't happen again. We have a lot of procedures and practices that will prevent it. It did happen, we recognize it, but our track record is good for 40 years that we haven't had this. And so, again, that's how we best try to summarize those questions. And I guess we'll open it up for questions from here.
Thank you very much, Mr. Foley. Appreciate you taking the time to go through some of the questions. I know there were probably well over 100. So at this time, I'll open it up to the counselors who may have questions for any of the Clean Harbors team. Councilor Maglio?
So you said that you power washed. Where did that water go?
Into the same, collected, after we power wash it, we collect them into those frac tanks and ship them off-site.
Frac tanks off-site, okay. So I just want to clarify. We heard from the air modeling consultant, right? That's what we call it, air modeling, that you hired. Not a problem. We're getting data from the LSP that you pay for, and we're waiting for DEP, although DEP has already authorized you to start your operations back up. I just wonder who's really here for the residents. It seems as though your deep pockets are pretty much steering this process, and who's here for us? Them.
We would be here for your environmental needs, we can assure you that.
Thank you, Councilor Maglio. Did anyone else want to respond?
Yeah, so I guess the only other thing I would comment on is we've been working hand in hand, and we've had multiple inspections since the incident. As we mentioned, at this moment, we've shut off the material that caused the incident. All of the past track records, all of the inspections, previous inspections that we've had, we've submitted, and those are on file with the DEP. We continue to have fire protection in every area that we are currently operating in the plant. We're following all of the regulations. We meet fire code. We continue to work with all the other agencies that govern the facility, and we're following all of those things compliantly.
I might just add as a response, I mean, that's why I brought up from the beginning the approach I take with projects like this. I mean, Clean Harbors reached out to me, not as, a Clean Harbors employee, but as an independent expert. I do this work for both public and private sector all over North America. And again, I tried to take a very, independent and specific approach to looking at this issue. So from that standpoint, I would include, obviously I'm looking out for the residents' concerns as well, because I know that's what would be near and dear to my heart if it were to have happened in my community. So trying to find a good answer to the questions that you have.
Thank you. Councilor Ringus?
Thank you, President Barica. I find it mind-boggling that you claim to be a good neighbor, a good partner for Braintree, and that you have resumed operations when the investigation is not complete. I find it mind-boggling the DEP, who is supposed to protect us, allows any sort of operations to restart when there is still so many unknowns. We have heard tonight of a video that you've done an independent investigation. I haven't heard of any other outside agency having seen that video. I know that we haven't seen that video. To me, you harp on the fact that, you know, you've been open for 40 years and never had an incident, and that is a great track record. But unfortunately, as we've spoken about tonight, with the cumulative effect of so many, I'm not going to say dangerous, I think Council Maglio might, but I will say so many industrial type facilities in that area, to not have a clear understanding of exactly what occurred across the gambit, and to say that this investigation is totally closed, it seems a half-hearted notion to say that you are a contributing member to this community. So the first thing I ask you is, Mayor Kokoris had sent a letter requesting that Clean Harbors contribute to air quality monitors, and in the entirety of that presentation, I didn't even hear it addressed. So will Clean Harbors be contributing to the cost of air quality monitors throughout that area of town?
I would say that if it was, you know, written into from DEP essentially into law or policy, we would honor that. We would honor that policy.
I'm not asking about the law. I'm asking that you want to be a contributing member of this community. You want to be a partner to this community. So I'm not asking it to be forced upon you. I'm asking you to commit that you're going to do it outside and above any law. If you want to be a part of this community, if this whole spiel that you just went through is genuine, then why wouldn't you take that extra step to pay for any sort of air quality monitoring, at least around your facility?
So currently, there's nothing that would lead us to the conclusion that air quality monitoring is required. As far
See,
as
again and again and again and again and again and again, it's not required. I know it's not required. I'm not asking what's required. I'm not asking what's legal. I'm asking, you want to be a contributing member of this community. You give us this spiel that you care about the town, that you care about cleaning up environmental messes. What I'm asking is you, on the record tonight, to commit to, absent any law, absent any regulation, that you're going to be a contributing member of this community, and you are going to, on your own accord, volunteer to pay for air monitoring in the area.
So we continue to put our
So
offer out
to
work with the community.
It doesn't need 3 sentences. Yes or no, will you pay for air monitoring? It's yes or no.
We can continue to take that under advisement.
So
and
that's
review.
a no. That's a no.
Residents, just please let counselors ask questions now. We'll get to the resident comment.
So you put out a contingency plan and preparedness plan. Have you guys all reviewed that?
Yes, we have.
And so given that you just had a major incident at your facility, an incident that could have had a severe environmental impact and that is still being investigated, my assumption is that this plan that you sent out to us, and you sent it out, and I'll note, you sent out one copy last Thursday, a secondary copy was sent out, and you noted that there was, I think, an issue with one of the site plans with the location of a trailer, and you adjusted that. That's fair to say?
I'm not sure I recall that.
So I'll bring it up for you. There is a document that we received that is referred to as the Contingency Plan and Preparedness and Prevention Plan prepared by Clean Harbors, amended as of March 13th of 2023. Are you familiar with that document?
Yeah, we understand now.
Okay, and it's hundreds of pages long. But my assumption is, given that you've amended that as of March 13, 2023, it's fair to say that you want everything in here to be accurate, to be fair, and that this would be a representation of the type of work that you're putting into ensuring that this sort of stuff doesn't happen again.
Yeah, there was last meeting, we did acknowledge that there was some errors in that document, and we fixed them.
Okay, and so given that you want to address any issues, and you've amended this as of March 13th, so it's March 21st today, so that was 8 days ago. So now you've re-reviewed this document, you've fixed any mistakes as of 8 days ago, and you've resubmitted to us, fair to say?
Yes, sir.
And so you would stand by that this is the type of work that you guys put into ensuring that there's going to be no future issues?
Yes, sir.
So on page 27 of that document, it notes various agencies that you're going to contact in the event of an emergency. Is that fair to say?
Yes, sir.
And on page 27, under the medical, who we're going to contact in event of a medical emergency, it says that Clean Harbors will contact Quincy City Hospital. Is that fair to say?
I believe that that is what we resolved on the last document.
That's right.
In Quincy City Hospital, if we called it, I'm pretty sure they wouldn't answer as they closed in 2014.
Yes, sir. That's why we resolved that last meeting. Yes,
But
sir.
it hasn't been resolved because it still appears in the document that you sent us as of March 13th of 2023.
I'd have to review that document. I was under the impression that that was resolved.
So once again, we're left here as members of this community, and you're trying to say to us that you're taking all necessary steps, and you can't fix a very basic error in a document?
Yeah, again, I believe that
We
that was
submitted-
resolved last time. And I don't know what document you're reading, but our intention was to resolve that. And if it's not, we will have to revisit that.
But
I believe
again,
it
you
is.
can see how that might, when such a basic thing can't be fixed, it makes me as a counselor who's elected to serve the interests of the residents and to ensure that safety protocols are being followed. If you can't fix a very basic thing like that, then how can I trust the rest of what you're saying?
So I think we would need to review the document that you have and compare it against what we submitted as an updated version to the
So
DEP.
again, it's pretty fair to say that you weren't ready. And so once again, the residents have to worry what else isn't up to snuff.
Again, we appreciate that. We'd like to review the document to make sure that we are talking about the right document, because it is our impression that last time we resolved that issue.
Well, it doesn't seem like it was.
Well, I don't know.
And I think that's a continuing issue that we're going to have. We're not getting a commitment for air monitor quality. We're not getting a commitment that the investigation is done. I appreciate your words tonight. I appreciate, and I know that there'll be a thorough investigation, and I trust in that. It hasn't been completed yet, and we have residents that are concerned. Councilor Maglio has listed a plethora of concerns that residents from East Braintree have, and she's doing a great job advocating on behalf of that. But we're sitting here and we're just kind of going over the same stuff over and over again, and we're really not getting to the root cause and some of the concerns that residents have. And I don't know sitting here tonight what that answer is. If DEP isn't going to hold you accountable and you're not going to hold yourselves accountable, I don't know where that leaves us.
Thank you, Councilor Ringus. Councilor O'Brien?
Tough to follow up, of course, with that, but I have two questions. Is this gentleman the LSP?
No.
No, sir.
Okay, so nothing that he said is directly related, could be, but it's not directly related with what the LSP is going to provide to us and the DEP, and because us being, we're the public, right? So it was mentioned that by the DEP, Ms. Garcia Serrano, that it will be uploaded at the same time that they receive it. Okay. And then, so the only other question I have, because the residents will get up, and I'm sure I can tell already there's plenty of questions for you. You mentioned that tonight, and I'm just looking for clarification, that you knew on the manifest what was on the truck that potentially using your term, self-initiated. But last time you were here, you didn't know that it was a potential self-initiating material. Did I get that wrong? Because last time there was concern that the sender of the material, the customer, because that would be your customer, right? The customer sent you X material, may have ended up being Y, and therefore you've kicked that customer off of your payroll. That's good, we appreciate that. But tonight it sounded to me like the manifest did tell you what was on that material, and if it was self-combusting, why was it on a vehicle like that or a trailer like that, subject to potential heat, whatever else would happen inside of a trailer. I've been in trailers in my previous youth life, loading them. It gets hot as you know what in those trailers. So if it was a self-initiating material, why was it allowed to sit out in a vehicle? And of course, I'll let you get there. Hold on. In a vehicle that could have combusted and subsequently ended up having this house fire, which is what it's being winnowed down to.
So yes, sir. I believe we said the same last meeting, is that we felt it was a self-initiating material, and clearly it was off specification. So in and of itself, on the surface, it's not a problem, but when it is off specification, That's when it became a problem. And so ultimately, the customer misrepresented the material that was on the trailer.
One more, yeah,
Go
so
ahead,
that's what I
Counselor.
was looking for, that I didn't feel emanating tonight.
Okay.
That I did last time.
Sure.
Was that customer, I'm not letting you guys off the hook, clearly, there's others that aren't, but from the perspective of, we live here, right? But yeah, tonight it sounded as though you knew based on the manifest, but okay, thank you very much, and thank you for kicking that customer off your customer list. And I'm sure we'll see you again.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Counselor, are you done? Okay, thank you, Counselor O'Brien. Counselor Hume?
Thank you, Madam President. This material that your customer had, is this any material a homeowner would have in their house?
No, ma'am.
Okay. And then on your contingency plan that was updated, you had 3 fire suppression systems before and you still have 3, or is this new? No new fire suppression systems that are mentioned in this?
No.
Correct? Okay. And I just want to piggyback on what Councilor Ringus said. Page 53 of your document, our hazmat officer is Captain Pistorino, who was here at our last meeting. Stephen Sawtell is a retired hazmat officer, and our ambulance provider is Brewster, not the Braintree Police. Okay.
Thank you, Counselor Hume. The counselors, okay, I'd like to just echo Counselor Ringus and thank you for bringing it up. I'm really at a loss at what feels like a very easy give of an air quality monitor. We are not asking for, we understand, I think the residents of Braintree understand the important work Clean Harbors does. Nobody wants biohazards piling up. However, the mayor and the councilors and the residents are asking for air quality monitors. They cannot be, it's so expensive that it is going to undermine the entire business. And I'd also like to say that, yes, you've been in business since the 1980s. If we rewind 40 years ago, that was pre-environmental justice designations. That was before we had a mayoral form of government, well before that. And we are now at a time when the expectations have changed. We're not doing things the way we did them in the 1980s. My expectation is that Clean Harbors will come to the table and join with the mayor to implement, I would recommend, a host community agreement. We are the host community. We understand that we're taking in hazardous waste from all over eastern Massachusetts, and we're hosting it. And we deserve to get something in return because we're putting ourselves and our residents at risk. The mayor was able to negotiate firefighters and police officer salaries for a water treatment plant. This is astronomically more dangerous than a water treatment plant. And so again, to echo the sentiments of my colleagues, we're asking you to come to the table, put your money where your mouth is. You're saying you're good neighbors. We expect you to demonstrate that you're good neighbors. If an air quality monitor causes you concern for not bringing it, that's causing me greater concern, because why won't you purchase that? So I'm not expecting you to answer this all tonight, but I am expecting something to come back to us with some kind of mitigation and compensation, frankly, for having to host what is and shoulder the burden of hazardous waste from across eastern Massachusetts.
Madam President, we appreciate your concern, and it sounds like frustration. As we mentioned, we would take the air monitoring under advisement and review, and so we will get back to you on that. As it relates to investment and doing things for the community, we continue to do that. If you remember and recall, several years ago, we invested in a fire truck for the fire department. We continue to look at how do we continue to make the facility safer and invest in the infrastructure of the facility. The building that is being constructed right now, again, is looking at how do we make sure that we're supporting sustainability and that we're putting in better buildings and infrastructure for the community and beautification of the area. Again, as it relates to safety and safe operations of the facility, we have over 1,200 employees that also live and work within this area. We care about them and we care about you, everyone in this room, as well as the other residents that are not here today. So we will continue to work and make sure that we are operating safely and compliantly. We have made an offer to participate and work with the town on emergency evacuation. So when we're ready to do that, we will be at the table.
Well, we'll look forward to an update on the mitigation. Councilor Hume, did you want to add something?
I just want to add this. Residents are watching at home. So a resident sent this. It's in regard to the air quality, air monitoring. Clean Harbor's revenue for the 12 months ending December 31st, 2022 was $5.167 billion, a 35.76% increase year over year. I think you can afford the air quality monitoring systems.
Okay. Any other questions from councilors? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, we are now going to move on to residents. Let me remind everyone, residents who wish to speak, I do have folks who signed in, and I will call you to the podium. You will have up to 3 minutes to speak. Again, if you hear me tap the gavel once, that's the 30-second reminder. I'll be a little louder than that. And then a double tap, or otherwise I will let you know when your time is up. Residents, please address the council, not the audience. We need to hear you for one thing, and I will give the agencies and entities here an opportunity to address any comments after everyone has spoken. I also want to add, and I extend apologies to the resident who was here at our last meeting who had trouble accessing our podium. We have got a portable microphone now to improve accessibility. So if you have mobility hindrances that preclude you from coming up to the podium, just raise your hand. I'm sure one of us will see you, and we will bring the microphone to you. We want to make sure that everybody gets heard. So thank you for your patience and for being such a civil and civic audience. That's really what we strive for here, so we can hear from everyone. All right, so first, I'd like to call Mike Tobin, 58 Brookside Road. Thank you for being here, Mr. Tobin.
Thank you. First, I'd like to thank the councilors for your commitment and your passion for looking out for our best interests. I was hoping to get some answers tonight. Basically, my questions are pretty basic. They're the questions that everybody has. Is it safe to walk around in Weymouth Landing? What happened on, was it safe on February 16th, 17th, and 18th to walk around? I don't know when those answers are coming, but that's one of my main questions. The thing that astounds me, it absolutely astounds me, I'm becoming aware, and dawn's early light, whatever you want to say, but what is it about the Fore River area and the right side of Quincy Ave, if you're heading to Quincy, that it becomes a mecca for toxicity? Constant reapproval of toxic businesses being able to show up there and do business over and over and over again. What is that about? It's eye-opening. And was definitely, and I don't have all the information, I admit that readily, but I don't appreciate the urgency of reopening for business when, as it has been said tonight, there are so many unknowns, like the question I still have, is it safe to walk around? We don't have, there's not enough urgency that I'm seeing to get those answers What took precedent was opening the business. And I feel unserved in that regard, particularly by the WPA. That's it, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tobin. Nancy Tobin? Thank you. All right, next I have Andrea Honore, Weymouth. Thank you for being here tonight.
Thanks for, I don't know what the rules are, but thanks for letting a non-resident speak at your town council, which, by the way, you guys are frickin' fantastic. I'm telling you, yes. I'm getting a tiny bit of catharsis for these 6+ years that we've been dealing with the Enbridge compressor. So, I'll go a little fast, and there's a point. I did write it down, so I'm not meandering too much. I was just at Weymouth High School before this, judging the senior capstone projects. They work on these all year long. And there are 2 nights that we go judge. There were 2 projects this year that were had to do with the Enbridge gas transmission compressor in Weymouth. One of the main shocks for these kids as they researched their projects was how our municipal and state government and its environmental agencies let companies like Enbridge put communities in immediate and long-term danger with very few restrictions, enforcement, or truly meaningful consequences. The kids doing the projects, their families, their teachers, their friends, the project judges, and more now know that the DEP is not to be trusted. It horrifies all who learn about it, horrifies them. Those of us in the audience who've been through the process of fighting the compressor have had many experiences with DEP. We know not to trust LSPs paid for by the polluting industry. By the way, is it a house fire or major hazardous waste fire? We are sitting in the audience, Weymouth residents and others from the basin, listening to all this with PTSD, and I don't say that as a joke. The basin has been pockmarked with polluting facilities over the years, and like this gentleman had said, renewed permits. And DEP seems to pretend the basin is not incredibly dangerous and its facilities require no more attention than one would give a strip mall. By the way, every single purple air monitor that they were referencing has been fundraised for privately by the community, and the state monitor was fought for years by residents and legislators. It wasn't placed there out of the goodness of anyone's heart. Since September 2020, Enbridge has dumped 1,398,97 standard cubic feet of methane.
Thank you, Ms. Honore.
Oh, wait, boom. And 195 pounds of VOCs that we know of. Anyway, to me, the main issue here isn't about fumbling the reverse 911, the hunt for hydrants, or the firefighter training on toxics or lack thereof. This is about Clean Harbors and their clearly sloppy business practices, and DEP enabling them to continue to do so.
Ms. Honore, if you want to email us that, we will get it all into the
cool.
record. Thank you.
Thank you to everybody who has dealt with this.
Thank you very much. Mr. Lang, Mike Lang, 674 Cotton Ave.
This is going to kill me, 3 minutes. Anyway, the consultant that said that all this material is the same stuff that's in your sofa, that says it's in your sofa, should be ashamed. If you go online and you check all these chemicals, you can see the safety data sheets that come with these products. And this one is really good. You'll love this. First of all, it tells flammable liquid and vapor, but it also says damages fertility and may damage your unborn child. You may want to think about that. But I wanted to address the statement that they've been good neighbors for 40 years and they haven't had any problems. This is one I dug up. It's EPA. When you gave us that truck, you paid for half the truck. The other half we paid for, and it was only because EPA was
Mr. Lang, just
squeezing.
speak into the microphone, please.
The EPA was squeezing him to do it. This is from the EPA, and it says EPA identified nearly 30 violations of both the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act and the Emergency Planning Community. Those violations included inadequate waste characterization, the failure of properly maintaining its hazardous waste tanks, inadequate secondary tank containment, and improper storage of incompatible waste. It says also that the company's hazardous waste tanks were deteriorating and in poor condition. So that's that. The other thing is, as previously stated, the LSP is not only paid for by the pollutant itself, they also get to pick who the LSP is. Now, in the case of Enbridge, they picked someone from their own consulting firm. And by the way, that LSP, they were doing soil testing, and the LSP got to monitor her husband that was doing the soil testing. No conflict there. Anyway, and for the DEP, it was already stated, you didn't do anything. We tried for 45 years to get you to put a monitoring station in here, and finally, through political pressure, we got it. And the thing is that when they put it in the wrong place, because it's right behind the power plant, and the hazardous waste incinerator decision was based on some different things. First of all, you can't have an evacuation plan in this area, and the other thing is that the area is impacted by coastal zone inversion, which means the air currents won't do it. So when you're checking that monitor for particles and all that stuff, you're not going to see them because it's behind the power plant. Anyway, I just had to emphasize that. Thank you. And here's another thing. Regulatory agencies depend mostly on industry self-reporting pollution violations. So if you look that up, you'll find that's a fact. And I don't know if I stated, I'm glad to see that the fire chief is going to talk to the other communities. That was another 45-year effort that we made. And now if you can do that in your evacuation plan, we'd be grateful.
Thank you, Mr. Lang.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next, we have Alice Arena, 6 Blueberry Street in Weymouth. Alice is still, okay. I believe we did hear from Alice last time. Brian Keegan. If you can please state your address. Thank you for being here, Mr. Keegan.
Hi, thank you for having me. I live in the Weymouth section of the Fall River Basin. I'm wondering if anyone could donate their 3 minutes to me?
No. Go ahead, carry on.
2?
Everyone has 3 minutes.
I may run over a little bit, but I guess, there's a lot of people here I would have questions of, but I'm going to try to focus my questions on a few of them. If you go, I've been involved in many public meetings, and the school that I went to on public meetings is that you never get asked a question you can't provide a good answer to. That's a little bit of twist on what a lawyer's advice would be. But, it's just like puppy training. You take the puppy right to the crap on the floor, stick their nose into it, keep on sticking their nose into it till they give you the right answer. But, I can't believe at $800 million in profits that you couldn't afford $100,000 on some air sampling. You must spend more at a sales rep meeting than that amount. I am also glad that the DEP clarified
Mr. Keegan, just
ppm.
speak to the council, please.
Okay. I'm glad that the DEP clarified the 0.8 ppm as measured by the PIDs as not being representative of the air quality in the area. That was a question up until today. I'd like to ask the air modeling person where did they get their meteorological data from? Did they get it from the DEP monitoring station? Could the DEP monitoring station be impacted by the fact that it has this huge air cooling system that sucks in hundreds of thousands or millions of CFM per hour and could be drafting that air monitoring station and affecting any meteorological data? Also, you have this 500-foot stack and associated power plant that blocks the wind. So if the wind is usually from a westerly direction or southwesterly direction, you may get a different reading. I asked the DEP if they validated that against other NWS meteorological stations. They didn't have an answer for me yet. So I guess with the air modeling, there's a lot of assumptions being made. There will need to be more assumptions made, and then the risk reduction model can be made. So when I look at the air data, I see the particle monitoring data of the DEP is not that much different than the Idlewild monitoring.
Thank you, Mr. Keegan. If you want to email us
I have
the rest of
17
your
pages
comments.
of stuff that you
Thank
guys give me just enough material.
That-
I don't even have to prepare before I come.
Thank you, Mr. Keegan. Next, we have Erin Joyce, 100 Wyman Road. Thank you for being here this evening, Chairwoman of our Planning Board.
Good evening, councilors. Erin Joyce, 100 Wyman Road. I wear a lot of hats around town, so it is a little bit unusual to be in this room and not be sitting up there as chair of the planning board. But I just wanted to speak this evening, a couple thoughts. We need to be better on the other side of this, whatever that ends up being. And while we probably won't be able to eliminate the risk, hopefully we will be better at managing it. So I would like to offer thoughts that I hope may help some aspects of the contingency plans moving forward and touch base on some ideas to support questions and thoughts that some of the counselors had posed this evening. So the night of the fire, it was after a PTO meeting. I was out with a bunch of fellow moms at Uno's having a drink, and all of a sudden one of the moms flashes a picture, and you know, we're there talking about schools and budgets and how we're worried about that, and then all of a sudden there's a fire, and we're like, what's really important? And I will tell you, it's all important and it's all connected, and I will appreciate your due diligence over the coming months, staying on top of this with everything else that's going on. So my thoughts are along the lines of what we as a town can do to protect and help ourselves. I think we need to be very on top of that. So 3 quick comments on water systems in real life. Private hydrants versus public hydrants. I think it's important that we track those and we keep track, and property owners who have private hydrants are reporting them to us if they're connected to our water systems, and then our fire department knows what's private, what's public, and what hydrants are reliable. So some communities paint them as a way to do that. So maybe a way to paint problematic hydrants just initially, and then they can be repainted when they're repaired. Also, private hydrants can also be painted different pictures or different colors to help identify that. I also think that we should make it a point to be acutely aware of susceptible areas in our system and track that, especially when potential projects come online. As a member of the planning board, I don't typically see water improvements targeted when we get feedback from DPW about this project possibly contributing to water system improvements, so I think we need to sharpen our pencils on that. A comment on the LSP. I am a professional engineer. A lot of times when we have projects before a community, the community will hire a peer review of another professional engineer to offer that service. I don't know if I think it's a little atypical for the town to hire an LSP review professional, but possibly. And then one quick thing, who spearheads the emergency evacuations plans? How long does it take? Who's held accountable? And is it a committee? Is it the mayor? Is it the fire chief across the communities? That is going to be key moving forward. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Joyce. Next, Chrissy Murphy. What? Brady, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Chrissy. I wrote it down wrong.
That's it.
I apologize.
I just want to thank you guys. I'm the president of the East Braintree Civic, and Councilor Ringus, you stole my thunder there. We've been here since Clean Harbor, since the night of the fire, since 2 of these meetings, and all we've asked Clean Harbors are 2 things. Air monitors and evacuation plans. Those have been our ask all along, and neither one of you could stand here with everything you've said and give us the peace of mind that we need. As a good neighbor, as you've said, we've asked 2 questions in all this time, and we've listened to everything. You're expert today. Other than hearing his resume, I know he said 3 trailers plus. That was relatively small. Well, I'm sorry, sir, not if it was burning next to your house. It is not relatively small. That did not come over so well. The DEP, I don't know how you can actually not solve anything and give without anything being resolved. You don't even have results of anything. The right to start up work again without giving any consideration to the neighborhood. I don't understand that. And again, I'm going to go on record asking you again, are you going to do air quality monitors?
Ms. Brady,
We're
just
trying to
address
do
the
that.
council, please.
Sorry, I'm just going to ask you again. Are you going to do it? That's it.
Thank you very much. Okay, that is the last of folks who signed up, but I do want to give residents who are here, anyone who hasn't spoken yet, if you would like to come forward and say a few words, please come forward and state your name and address. Yeah, and if you don't have to stand in line, everyone should be comfortable. Thank you, go right ahead.
My name's Ed Cowan of Wilson Ave in Weymouth. I just wanted to say a couple things. Like, first, you should
Please
give
address the council, Mr. Cowan.
I would say, like, the air quality monitoring station, like, that is the least they could ask for. I don't think that should be the only thing that they ask for and they get. The people of this town, people of this area, this town council. But I think you should really consider that. Secondly, the DEP, you guys really got to stop approving toxic crap in this area. There's too much of it. You should be unwinding some of it, actually, using the new laws for environmental protection. I think the last meeting y'all had and this meeting, actually, I heard a lot of things that I didn't really like, I wouldn't be thrilled with. Like I'd want to hear more. But I do think you all are on the right track and you're asking the right questions. But like the hydrants, like you need to get to the bottom of all these questions because this could be a lot worse, and like these issues compounding each other. Like I know you're on the right track. You'll get to the questions, but you guys should really step up and do the minimum at least. But that's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cowan. Appreciate that. Thank you for being here. Please state your name and address for the record.
Thank you. My name is Michelle Maloney. I live on 24 Wellington Street. Been a resident in my childhood home since I was 10. I don't know, it hurts my heart a little bit to hear the word toxins when really what we're talking about is known carcinogens. I say this as someone who has metastatic breast cancer, who was pregnant with breast cancer in 2010, was re-diagnosed last year. Do I think it's Clean Harbor's fault? No. Do I think it's Braintree's fault? No. But could it be a cumulative effect of all of the toxins that have been in and around me my entire life, and not just the toxins from Clean Harbor and Bridge or anywhere else, but just everything else that's consumed in our environment? We need to address the fact that there is a cumulative effect of all of this, and we owe it not just to me, to my 12-year-old, to my husband, to my mother, but to all of us to make sure that we are reducing risk, if you want to call it that. The risk of what? The risk of that I'll never be cancer-free, the risk that others won't be too. This is real stuff we're talking about, and I think we have a real opportunity, and I think that as a town and a city and a government and all the resources that we have, we're doing a really great job digging into it, but I loved the term host community. As a host community and neighbors for a lot of these things, we need to stand up and demand what should be given to our community so that we have the resources that we need, that we can create an evacuation plan. You know, I'm late to the game of being involved in all of this, and the more I hear about it and the more that I sit and I listen with my husband and come to these meetings, I'm horrified about what we've allowed to happen in this community that I grew up in. And this is our moment to meet with these organizations and these companies who are our neighbors and demand that they help us figure out the resources that we need to protect all of us. And so that's what I'm asking for you. And again, that's the bare minimum. Like, we are hosting you. We are the community that's here. And I love that we're asking those questions. And I would say we need to ask just not of Clean Harbors, but everyone in and around here to look at the cumulative effect of not benzene that was on our trailer, but every single known carcinogen that could be anywhere in our area. So thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for sharing your story. Any other residents? Okay, I want to say on behalf of the council, thank you so much to all of the residents that we've heard from over the last month. It has been an outpouring of compassion and passion because we all care so deeply about Braintree. And I know Councilor Maglio is a fierce advocate for District 3, and as she stated, and Councilor Hume earlier, we will continue to keep this on our agenda. And Mr. Cowan said it earlier, if you have ideas, questions, are there things that we should be asking, please email towncouncil@braintreema.gov. We count on all of you to help us serve you. So again, I want to thank the residents for your participation and for sticking with us this evening. I do want to offer, if the mayor or anyone else wants to say a few words before we do actually have a few voting matters tonight to get to. Okay. Thank you. And again, thank you to everyone for your participation this evening. Okay, so with that, I will move on now to the approval of minutes from, go ahead.
Motion to approve the minutes of February 7th, 2023.
Second. Thank you, Councilors Hume and Ringus. All in favor to approve the minutes?
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? That is unanimous. Okay. If folks can just take the conversations outside so we can get this, get through our business, that would be very appreciated. Thank you. All right, the next item is old business, the next town council order. It is a public hearing that we need to open and then continue. So this is a procedural matter. We will not be discussing this evening. This is 23013 Mayor, discontinuance of King Hill Road Tri-Town Water Treatment Plant or take up any action relative thereto. Is there a motion to open the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Councilors Hume and Ringus. All in favor to open the public hearing?
Aye.
Any opposed? That is unanimous. And now is there a motion to continue the public hearing to April 4th, 2023 at 7:30 p.m. for order 23013?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Councilors Hume and Ringus. All those in favor?
Aye.
That is unanimous. Anyone opposed? Sorry, I lost my place. That is unanimous. Okay, moving on to new business this evening. We have 01523 Town Clerk Review of Voting Act of 2022 Impact to Local Elections. So I'm just going to let councilors know that included with our meeting documents, please review the report from Town Clerk Casey regarding the upcoming local elections, the Votes Act of 2022, and the council's role in implementing the Votes Act. So we're not going to act on this evening. This is informational. The Board of Registrars is scheduled to meet on Tuesday, March 28th. They will also be discussing this same report, and they need to vote on the status of early voting in person for the upcoming local elections, and then it will come back to us. So Clerk Casey is available, and thank you very much, Clerk Casey, for always being available to the council to discuss the contents of the report. If anybody has any questions, please take it up with him. With that, is there a motion to move all measures under new business to their respective committees?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Councilors Hume and Ringus. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That is unanimous. All right, with that, our next meeting will be on Tuesday, April 4th, 2023 at 7:30 p.m. As always, thank you to BCAM for televising this and sticking with us this evening. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you, Councilors Hume and Ringus. All those in favor to adjourn? Aye. Any opposed? This meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.